You've been lied to. Not in the fun, entertaining way like when someone swears the cake is sugar-free, and then you realize you've just consumed 3 weeks' worth of calories. No, this is a quieter kind of lie. The kind that shows up in school textbooks, with neat timelines and cheerful illustrations of pilgrims and corn. The lie goes something like this. North America was a mostly empty wilderness before Europeans showed up. A place of scattered villages, a few wandering tribes, and lots of deer just waiting to be turned into jerky. Except, it wasn't. Buried beneath suburbs, highways, and the occasional Walmart parking lot are the remains of vast cities. Cities with tens of thousands of people, carefully planned neighborhoods, monumental earthworks, taller than anything you'd want to climb without an elevator, and economies that stretched across a continent. They were here long before Columbus, long before Jamestown, long before the idea of America was even scribbled on a map. But you weren't told about them. Why? That's complicated. Maybe because it's easier to justify conquest when you convince yourself there was nothing much here to destroy. Maybe because pyramids in Illinois sounds like the setup to a bad History Channel special. Or maybe because people in power simply don't like rewriting their neat little origin stories. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Entire civilizations slipped out of the story, leaving only mounds of dirt as silent witnesses. And yes, I said mounds of dirt. Not exactly glamorous. No gleaming marble, no crumbling stone temples. Just massive grassy hills that most people drive past without even noticing. You've probably seen one. Maybe you thought it was just a weirdly symmetrical hill. Maybe you picnicked on top of it. Maybe you tossed a frisbee to your dog and never realized you were standing on the roof of someone else's sacred monument. Congratulations, you've already been to an archaeological site and didn't know it. Here's the thing. Dirt lies. It's quiet, unassuming, modest. Dirt covers secrets. And in places like Cahokia, Poverty Point, and Moundville, dirt was sculpted into skyscrapers of the ancient world. Thousands of laborers hauling baskets of soil, piling them carefully layer by layer, until the result was a structure so big it still looms over highways today. But because it's made of earth instead of stone, because it doesn't look like Giza or Machu Picchu, it often gets ignored. And ignoring is easier. Ignoring means you don't have to think about the fact that North America once had bustling metropolises with astronomers, traders, elites, and maybe even the occasional overworked intern hauling clay pots across town. Ignoring means you don't have to consider the inconvenient truth that indigenous people weren't just living off the land. They were building it, reshaping it, engineering it. Take Cahokia, for instance. At its peak, around 1,000 years ago, it was larger than London. Yes, London, the one with the T and the Tower Bridge, and the royal family's endless drama. Imagine trying to tell people that in the middle of Illinois, before Europeans even figured out how to properly wash, there was a city with grand plazas, sprawling suburbs, and a population of maybe 20 ling. Spoiler alert. Most folks won't believe you, but it's true. And Cahokia wasn't alone. Poverty Point, older by nearly 2,000 years, sprawled across what is now Louisiana, with enormous concentric ridges, and a massive mound shaped like a bird. Imagine that a city older than Athens, but buried under cotton fields. Then there's Moundville in Alabama, a ceremonial center that rivaled any cathedral town in medieval Europe, its carefully arranged mounds forming a city of the dead that was very much alive for centuries. So why don't you know about them? Why weren't these cities in your history lessons, wedged between Mesopotamia and Rome? Because when the narrative of America was written, these places didn't fit the plot. Too advanced to be primitive, but too indigenous to be ours. And so the simplest solution was to quietly erase them. But erasure never works forever. Archaeologists dig. Local communities remember. And every now and then, the dirt tells its story again. So tonight, dim your lights, get comfortable, and forget everything you thought you knew about lost cities. We're not going to Egypt or Mexico or anywhere with a souvenir stand. We're staying right here, in America where the lost cities aren't lost at all. They're hiding in plain sight. You wake up, stretch, and look around at a continent supposedly empty. Forests as far as the eye can see, rivers rolling like silver highways, fields waiting for their first plow. That's the story you were told. An untouched wilderness, a blank canvas, just waiting for European settlers to paint their masterpiece of civilization. Of course, that story has a few holes. The first one being, people were already here, millions of them. Entire nations with their own languages, cities, trade networks, and political drama. But if you're writing a history book in the 1800s, it's easier to skip that part. It makes the whole colonization thing feel a little less like theft and a little more like real estate development. Think back to the phrases that show up in old textbooks. Virgin land, undisturbed wilderness, a new world. These weren't innocent descriptions. They were marketing copy, the same kind of spin you'd expect from a real estate agent trying to sell you a house that's clearly haunted. The truth is less convenient. That so-called wilderness was a managed landscape. Forests were shaped by controlled burns. Rivers were harnessed with fish weirs and canals. Fields were cultivated with crops we don't usually credit to North America. Maize, beans, squash, sunflowers. People weren't just living in nature, they were engineering it, bending it to their needs, creating environments that looked wild, only to outsiders who didn't know what they were looking at. But here's the darkly funny part. When Europeans finally showed up in large numbers, much of the population had already been devastated by disease. Epidemics tore through communities before settlers even arrived, carried overland by early explorers and traders. Imagine a city emptied almost overnight, not by conquest, not by war, but by invisible germs. By the time permanent settlements were established, many of the great urban centers were already in ruins, and what was left seemed smaller, scattered, fragile. And so the myth of the empty land was born. It was convenient. If the land was empty, then taking it wasn't theft. If the people were nomads, then erasing their cities wasn't destruction, just progress. And if the mounds looked like random hills, then there was no need to ask difficult questions about who built them and what happened to those builders. Sometimes, the denial was almost comical. Early settlers stood on top of giant earth pyramids and insisted they couldn't possibly have been built by the ancestors of the very people living nearby. No, surely they were made by some lost race, some vanished mystery civilization, conveniently unrelated to the native communities still alive and well. That kind of logic is like finding your neighbor's car keys in your driveway and insisting they must belong to the Vikings. And yet, the myth stuck. It lingered in maps, in textbooks, in the polite lies of manifest destiny. Even today, you'll hear echoes of it, the idea that America began as a blank slate, waiting for progress to arrive on 3 little ships. But the mounds say otherwise. The artifacts say otherwise. The oral histories say otherwise. And once you start looking, the empty land suddenly feels very crowded. Crowded, with people planting fields, building plazas, trading goods from thousands of miles away, crowded with astronomers tracking the sun, priests overseeing rituals, and workers who probably hated their bosses just as much as you do. So next time you hear someone talk about discovering America, remember that what they really discovered was an excuse to ignore the fact that this continent had already been discovered, built, cultivated, and inhabited for thousands of years. And the irony? Those lost cities were never really lost. They were just inconvenient. Easier to bury under cornfields and subdivisions than to admit the story you've been telling is wrong. But we're not here for the convenient story. We're here for the messy one. The one where North America wasn't empty at all. It was alive, crowded, and busy. And it's about to get even busier, because next, we're going to Cahokia. So, let's clear something up right away. The phrase, urban life before Columbus, sounds suspiciously like a quiz question you'd get wrong on purpose, just to annoy your high school history teacher. You picture teepees, scattered villages, maybe the occasional canoe. Cities? No, that's supposed to be an old world thing. Athens, Rome, maybe some pyramids in Egypt or Mexico if your textbook was feeling adventurous. But Illinois? Alabama? Louisiana? Surely not. Except yes. Exactly that. If you time traveled back to, say, the year 1100, you'd find that North America had cities just as sophisticated as anything happening in medieval Europe. They had plazas, markets, suburbs, neighborhoods. They had monumental architecture, astronomical observatories, and political centers where power was concentrated in the hands of a very lucky few. And of course, they had everything that comes with a city. Noise, smells, too many neighbors, and the creeping suspicion that your house is smaller than everyone else's. Let's talk numbers, because numbers always make things real. Cahokia, the largest of these cities, had around 20 people at its peak. That might not sound huge by modern standards after all. You probably live in a city with more people than that stuck in traffic on the highway at rush hour. But for the year 1120, 0 was massive. London, yes, that London, had roughly the same population at the time. So while Europeans were squeezing into timber houses and arguing about who got to eat the last piece of moldy bread, people in Cahokia were busy building a metropolis with mounds that still tower over Illinois today. And Cahokia wasn't alone. Poverty Point, centuries earlier, gathered thousands of people into a planned community with concentric ridges so large you can only see them properly from the air. Meanwhile, Moundville in Alabama rose as a ceremonial and political hub with more than 24 mounds arranged neatly around a central plaza. You don't build something like that by accident. It's not like one person just got bored and decided to pile dirt for fun. These were organized projects, the result of centralized planning, leadership, and frankly, a lot of unpaid labor. What made these cities tick? The same things that make any city tick. Food, trade, and the constant hope that your neighbors don't throw a loud party on a weeknight. Agriculture played a huge role. Maize was spreading northward from Mesoamerica, joining beans, squash, and sunflowers as staples. Fields stretched for miles, feeding not just families, but entire urban populations. Trade networks connected the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, moving copper, shells, obsidian, and ideas across incredible distances. And religion bound it all together, with rituals, ceremonies, and monuments, reminding everyone that life was bigger than their hut and their daily grind. But here's where the sarcasm writes itself. When Europeans finally encountered the remnants of these places, they insisted they couldn't have been built by the ancestors of the native people living nearby. Oh no. Too advanced, too organized. Must have been some lost race that mysteriously disappeared, leaving only these awkward dirt piles behind. Because apparently it was easier to invent a vanished civilization than to admit the people you were trying to push off the land had built cities as impressive as your own. Of course, if you lived in one of these cities, you probably wouldn't have felt like you were in the middle of something glorious. You'd be worrying about food, family, gossip, and whether or not the mound construction project was ever going to end. You'd wake up to smoke in the air, dogs barking, neighbors shouting. You'd walk to a marketplace where fish, corn, and shell beads changed hands in a blur of barter. You'd hear drums, chants, and the occasional argument about whether the latest ritual was strictly necessary. In other words, life. Ordinary, messy, crowded, frustrating, and magnificent all at once. Urban life existed here long before Columbus. It thrived, collapsed, and in some ways still lingers, buried under our highways and our neighborhoods. We just don't call it a city, because the word city feels too modern, too polished. But if you strip away the skyscrapers and streetlights, what you're left with in Cahokia or Moundville isn't so different. People crammed together, building big things, arguing about leadership, trading food, and hoping tomorrow would be slightly better than today. So next time someone says, America didn't have cities before Europeans arrived, feel free to smile politely Then tell them about Cahokia, or Poverty Point, or Moundville. And if they don't believe you, just tell them to visit Illinois. There's a giant pyramid of dirt sitting right next to the highway, quietly proving the story wrong. You've probably driven past an ancient city without realizing it. Maybe you were late for work, sipping lukewarm coffee, stuck behind a pickup truck that absolutely refused to use its turn signal. Out the window, a gentle, grassy hill, symmetrical, oddly shaped. You didn't think twice. Why would you? It looked like a mound of dirt. Maybe a landfill. Maybe just a hill. But what if I told you that hill was older than most of Europe's castles? That's the thing about North America's ancient cities. They're not lost in the jungle like Maya temples, or dramatically ruined like the Colosseum. They're quieter, subtle. They blend into the landscape, covered in grass, swallowed by farmland, paved over by highways. The archaeology of this continent isn't hidden underground, so much as it's hiding in plain sight. Take Cahokia. Today, Monk's Mound, the largest earthen pyramid in the Americas, sits just a short drive from downtown St. Louis. You can literally see the gateway arch from the top. Commuters rush past it every morning, unaware they're skimming the edge of what was once the largest city north of Mexico. Imagine building your daily commute through the ruins of Rome, and not even noticing. That's basically what's happening. Or Poverty Point in Louisiana. Its concentric ridges are so massive, you can't even see them properly from the ground. For decades, farmers plowed right over them, planting cotton and soybeans in the soil of a 30-year-old city. The view only makes sense from above, which meant no one noticed until aerial surveys in the 20th century. Imagine thousands of years of human engineering erased by a tractor. Then there's Moundville in Alabama, where ceremonial mounds still rise along the Black Warrior River. Locals used to picnic on them. Families had barbecues at the base of what was once a sacred platform. People casually dug for artifacts, treating grave goods like souvenirs. Nothing says respect for the past, quite like using a 700-year-old burial mound as your weekend hangout spot. And it doesn't stop there. Across the Midwest and South, hundreds of mounds dot the landscape. Some are small, some monumental. Many have been bulldozed to make way for subdivisions, highways, or golf courses. That's right, you could be teeing off on the 7th hole without realizing you're standing on top of an ancient monument. Archaeology meets leisure sport, hole in one. The tragedy here isn't just destruction, it's indifference. Because earthworks don't look like the ruins we're trained to recognize. We expect stone arches, crumbling walls, ivy-covered towers. Dirt doesn't have the same drama. It's humble, too easy to mistake for nature. And so, entire cities were overlooked, forgotten, dismissed as natural hills. But once you do know what you're looking at, the landscape changes. A gentle rise in the earth becomes a pyramid. A circular ridge becomes an amphitheater of soil. The map of North America reshapes itself in your mind, from wilderness to civilization, from blank space to crowded cityscape. And it's not just about recognition, it's about imagination. Standing on a mound today, you see grass and sky, maybe a few passing cars. 1,000 years ago, you'd have seen plazas packed with people, markets buzzing with trade, smoke rising from thousands of houses. You'd hear drums, chants, laughter, arguments. Life layered beneath your feet, silenced by time and asphalt. So, yes, archaeology in America is subtle. No towering ruins, no gleaming marble, just earth. But that earth tells stories every bit as powerful as the ruins of Rome or Athens. You just have to stop, look twice, and maybe resist the urge to build a Walmart on top of it. And here's the kicker. Once you realize how much lies in plain sight, you can't unsee it. Every hill, every ridge, every suspiciously symmetrical rise in the landscape makes you wonder, is that just dirt? Or is it history pretending to be a hill? Spoiler alert. More often than you think, it's the latter. At this point, you might be thinking, all right, so there were a few big mounds, some people farming corn, maybe the occasional ceremony. Interesting, but not exactly mind-blowing. Fair enough. You've been conditioned to expect history to come with marble columns, dramatic ruins, and maybe a few gladiators. Piles of dirt don't quite hit the same. But here's the spoiler. It gets much stranger. Because once you stop dismissing these earthworks as just hills, you realize they're part of something much larger. Not just one site, not just one culture, but an entire web of cities, ceremonial centers, and communities stretching across what we now call the United States. Cahokia, Poverty Point, Moundville, they weren't random blips on the map. They were nodes in a continent-wide system. Trade moved across thousands of miles. Ideas spread like wildfire, and people organized themselves into urban societies that rivaled anything happening in Europe at the same time. Let's pause here for a comparison. Around the year 1100, while Cahokia was at its peak, Europeans were busy building cathedrals, fighting over who got to wear the fanciest crown, and occasionally dying from diseases caused by their complete refusal to bathe. Across the ocean, in North America, people were constructing a city with monumental plazas, astronomical observatories, and neighborhoods planned with surprising precision. But when history gets told, one is called a civilization, and the other is quietly edited out. And the weirdness doesn't stop with size. These cities weren't just settlements, they were landscapes of meaning. Mounds weren't random piles of soil, they were cosmological statements. Elevated platforms connected the earthly and the spiritual. Plazas hosted rituals that blended politics, religion, and theater. Entire communities were built as reflections of the cosmos, with alignments marking solstices and equinoxes. Imagine living in a city that was basically one giant calendar, constantly reminding you of your place in the universe. It's either awe-inspiring or really stressful, depending on how punctual you are. But let's be clear, urban life wasn't a paradise. Far from it. Just like any other city in history, these places had inequality, violence, and politics sharp enough to cut through bone. Some people lived in comfort, feasting on delicacies and adorning themselves with shell beads and copper ornaments. Others scraped by, building mounds for someone else's glory, hauling soil basket by basket while wondering why their back hurt at the age of 25. Congrats, you're a construction worker in the 12th century, paid in food and cosmic promises. And then there's the really dark part. Human sacrifice. Yes, it happened. Archaeological evidence from Cahokia and elsewhere shows ritual killings, often tied to elite burials or major ceremonies. We're not talking Hollywood-style mass slaughters, but enough to make you glad you're not living there. Nothing says community bonding, quite like being chosen as an offering to the gods. So, no, these weren't utopias. They were complicated, messy, vibrant cities filled with all the contradictions of human society. Beauty and brutality, art and warfare, spirituality and politics. In other words, civilization. And here's the ultimate irony. The very thing that makes them so easy to overlook today, their humble construction of earth instead of stone, is also what makes them extraordinary. Because dirt doesn't last. Diaterodes collapses, gets plowed over. And yet these mounds are still here, centuries later, defying time, weather, and indifference. That's not just impressive. It's weirdly poetic. So where do we go from here? Simple. We stop squinting at hills and start looking at them as the monuments they are. And the best place to begin is the largest of them all. A city so vast, it made medieval London look like a village. A place where 20 people lived, traded, prayed, and sometimes died in the shadow of a pyramid of dirt, bigger than anything Europe had seen. Welcome to Cahokia. And yes, it's hiding right next to a highway. You wake up to the smell of smoke and corn. Not the sweet, modern corn you boil in your microwave, but fresh, roasted, drying corn, filling the morning air with a scent that makes your stomach growl whether you like it or not. The sun peeks over the horizon, lighting the tops of Monk's Mound in a soft golden haze. And there it is, the pyramid, the centerpiece of this sprawling city, looming over everything like a silent reminder that someone thought it was a good idea to move tons of earth just to show off. Congratulations, you're in Cahokia. Population, roughly 20-0. You stumble out of your wooden hut, dirt floor, thatched roof, your humble belongings stacked neatly because, apparently, space management was a thing even back then. You squint at your neighbors, already emerging from similar huts, carrying baskets of food, tools, or small children. Life is happening in all directions. Dogs barking, people shouting, drums beating in the distance. And somewhere, very far off, a horn signals the start of the morning labor shift. It only gets worse. The city sprawls around you. Streets are wide and planned, lined with houses, workshops, and open plazas. You notice the marketplace already bustling with traders, carrying baskets of maize, beans, fish, and crafted goods. Shell beads glint in the early light, copper ornaments catch the sun, and wooden effigies stand at the corners of plazas as reminders of the spirits and ancestors that watch over you. You think to yourself, all this, and I have to deal with chores? No toilet, no soap, no sense of dignity, unless you count the honor of hauling baskets of soil for Monk's Mound as dignity. Spoiler, most people don't. That's life here. Survival, labor, community, and ritual, all tangled together like vines in the nearby forest. And speaking of the forest, it's everywhere. Trees ring the city, providing wood for construction, fire, and tools. Birds squawk overhead. Insects buzz incessantly, and the occasional raccoon or deer wanders too close to your hut, reminding you that the wilderness isn't far away, it's encroaching. Always observing, always a threat if you step out of line. And yet, the city doesn't fear nature entirely. It uses it. Fields stretch for miles, providing sustenance for thousands. Fish ponds and irrigation channels bring water to the hungry and thirsty alike. Life is a negotiation, and you're part of it whether you want to be or not. You make your way to the central plaza, the beating heart of Cahokia. The air hums with anticipation. People gather to trade, pray, perform rituals, or just gossip about last night's misadventures. Drums echo across the open space, marking time, calling attention to ceremonies or labor schedules. And in the distance, Monk's Mound rises massive, imposing, meticulously constructed. Every layer of soil, every slope and terrace, the product of countless hands over decades. You can't help but feel small standing at its base, both humbled and slightly annoyed that someone thought stacking dirt into a skyscraper was a good idea. The elite live atop the mound, naturally. The high-ranking families, priests and leaders, overseeing the city, receiving tribute, and probably enjoying a little more comfort than the rest of you. You, meanwhile, are part of the labor force, part of the mass of humanity, keeping Cahokia functioning. You trade, you work, you watch, you wait, and occasionally you glance at the mound and wonder how anyone could be so patient to haul basket after basket of soil for decades. Cahokia is alive. It's crowded, loud, chaotic, and beautiful in its own grounded way. There's no modern city noise, no asphalt, no electricity, just people, earth, fire, and sky, interacting in patterns that feel both familiar and alien. Life here is a constant rhythm of labor and ritual, of commerce and politics, of survival and ceremony. And you're in the middle of it all. So, welcome to Cahokia. Population 20, 0. Don't trip on the uneven dirt paths, and try not to get in trouble with the neighbors. You're awake in a city older than London, larger than anything European visitors expected to find, and somehow still here, centuries later, whispering its story through mounds and soil. And yes, we're only getting started. You stand at the base of Monk's Mound and, for a moment, consider turning around and going home. Not because you're afraid, although the sheer scale is intimidating, but because your brain is quietly screaming, this is dirt. Just dirt. How is this a pyramid? And yet, it is. Monk's Mound is the largest earthen pyramid in the Americas, bigger at the base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its terraces rise in layers, meticulously constructed over decades, the product of countless hands hauling baskets of soil, sand, and clay. You try to imagine what that would have felt like back-breaking labor, sweat dripping into your eyes, sun scorching your back, all for the glory of the elite atop the mound. Congrats, you've just volunteered to move tons of dirt in a world without cranes or forklifts. From a distance, it might look like a gentle hill, almost modest. But step closer, and the illusion fades. Each terrace is carefully leveled, each slope intentional. The top is flat, a platform for the leaders, priests, and ceremonies that govern the city. From there, they can see the entire settlement, the plazas, the neighborhoods, the fields stretching toward the horizon. And you can't help but feel a pang of envy, or maybe resignation, knowing the elite can literally look down on everyone while you haul soil for their view. Construction of Monk's Mound wasn't a weekend project. It took decades, maybe generations, to reach its full height. That means countless workers, day in and day out, dragging soil from the surrounding area, layering it carefully, patting it down, repeating the process until the mound rose to a height of more than 100 feet. And because dirt isn't stone, maintenance was constant. Erosion, rain, wind, all slowly trying to undo centuries of labor. You start to wonder if anyone ever muttered, under their breath, "Why did I sign up for this?" Monk's Mound was more than just a display of power. It was a stage, a calendar, a sacred space. Ceremonies held atop it marked the rhythms of the city, the changing seasons, and the cycles of the cosmos. Imagine watching the sunrise from the top during the solstice, seeing the light strike just the right spot, and knowing that this alignment was intentional. Someone, many someones, had to calculate angles, observe patterns, and ensure that each layer of earth reinforced not just the structure, but the city's cosmology. Dirt, math, and faith, all intertwined. And yet, despite its majesty, Monk's Mound was functional. Storage buildings, elite residences, and temples once sat atop it, housing not just leaders, but the rituals that kept Cahokia running. From their elevated perch, the city's overseers could monitor trade, labor, and gatherings. It was a control tower, a symbol, and a spiritual anchor all at once. You, standing at the base, can't help but feel a little dizzy imagining the view, the authority, the weight of generations compressed into a flat-topped dirt pyramid. Of course, modern visitors might misunderstand it. You can drive past Monk's Mound today, picnic on its terraces, or wander the interpretive trails without fully grasping the effort and intention behind it. Dirt doesn't command respect the way marble does. It doesn't inspire awe with a single glance. It demands time, observation, imagination, and maybe a little humility. Because when you really see it, the scale, the planning, the labor, it's impossible not to recognize the ambition of Cahokia. This wasn't a village thrown together by chance. It was a city built with purpose, sophistication, and a deep understanding of both people and landscape. And Monk's Mound was the beating heart of that city, a literal platform for power, ritual, and the human desire to leave something lasting. So next time you hear someone scoff at just a dirt pile, remember Monk's Mound. It's not just a pile of soil. It's a pyramid, a monument, a testament to human ambition long before modern cities existed in the region. And standing there, with the wind brushing against your face and the sound of distant drums in your ears, you finally start to understand what it meant to live in Cahokia. You step away from Monk's Mound, dust settling on your sandals, and wander toward the heart of Cahokia. The city hums around you, not with engines or neon signs, but with a rhythm that is both chaotic and organized. Traders shout their wares, children dart through narrow paths, and somewhere, drums mark the time of day. Or maybe they're just reminding everyone that life is short and crowded and slightly overwhelming. The marketplace is the center of it all. Wooden stalls are arranged neatly in rows, but nothing about the city feels tidy. Pots clink, baskets scrape against the packed dirt, and voices overlap in a symphony of commerce and gossip. You see piles of maize, beans, and squash, their scents mingling into something earthy and sharp. Fish from nearby rivers are being smoked, drying in the sun, while shell ornaments and copper tools catch stray sunlight, glinting like tiny promises of wealth. And you? You're just trying not to get trampled by a stray dog or a neighbor's runaway child. Welcome to urban life. Food isn't just sustenance. It's a sign of status, skill, and planning. Fields stretch beyond the city limits, carefully laid out in plots that maximize yield. Maize dominates, of course, the lifeblood of Cahokia. But beans, squash, and sunflowers complement it, creating a diet that's surprisingly balanced for a city without refrigerators. Irrigation channels and small canals crisscross the fields, ensuring that water reaches every patch, and fish ponds supplement the diet. Some of the wealthier neighborhoods even have specialized ponds stocked with fish, carefully maintained to feed elites during ceremonial feasts. You glance at one of these ponds and think, better than the river near my hut, but probably still smells like someone forgot to clean it. The logistics are staggering. How does a city of 20 people make sure everyone has enough to eat? How do you prevent famine when the seasons are unpredictable and the Mississippi River has a mind of its own? Cahokia manages it with a mix of organization, labor, and sheer human stubbornness. Farmers, fishers, laborers, and traders all contribute, each performing their part of a system that, from a distance, looks effortless. Up close, it's anything but. Sweat, mud, arguments, and exhaustion are everywhere. You smell it, see it, feel it, and somehow it all comes together to feed a city. Commerce isn't just about food. Trade networks extend across hundreds of miles. Shells from the Gulf, copper from the Great Lakes, stones from distant quarries all flow into Cahokia, moving along paths maintained and protected by the city's leaders. You can hold a bead in your hand, and it might have traveled further than you ever will. And yet, it's just a bead. Just another item in a bustling market, another reminder of a city that thrived long before Europe even had electricity. The market is noisy, the fields are dusty, the ponds are alive with fish and frogs, and everywhere you feel both connected and insignificant. This is urban life in Cahokia, structured, vital, demanding, and full of small moments of beauty and frustration. You barter for food, dodge a stray chicken, step over a puddle, and in the back of your mind, you think, all of this, and I still have to haul soil for Monk's Mound later. Congrats, life here doesn't come with a lunch break, a PTO plan, or modern plumbing. And yet, it's alive, vibrant, full of human ambition, ingenuity, and routine. People build, trade, fish, plant, cook, and pray. They argue, laugh, gossip, and occasionally get annoyed at their neighbors. You recognize it instantly because, despite the differences in architecture, clothing, and technology, urban life has a familiar rhythm. The smells, the noise, the sweat, the petty conflicts, the fleeting joys, all of it feels like something you might recognize if you squint hard enough. So, as you walk past the marketplace, peer into the fields, and watch fish leap in the ponds, you start to understand. Cahokia isn't just a city, it's a living organism. Every person, every plot of land, every basket of maize contributes to its heartbeat. And as you move through it, you realize, surviving here, thriving here, even noticing the world around you that is civilization. And remember, this is just day one. Monk's Mound looms behind you, the market thrums in front of you, and somewhere in the distance, the city whispers the next layer of its story. You notice the drums before you see them. Low, steady, resonant, a heartbeat that carries across the plaza, up the streets, and even into the fields. Somewhere beyond the marketplace, atop a smaller mound or maybe at the base of Monk's Mound, people gather for ceremonies. You can't avoid it. The sound pulls you like gravity. Welcome to the spiritual life of Cahokia. Religion here isn't tucked away in a building with stained glass. It's everywhere, woven into the city itself. Mounds, plazas, wooden posts, aligned with the sun, intricate effigies carved from stone and wood, all designed to bridge the mortal and the divine. Every movement of the sun, every flooding river, every seasonal change is accounted for, observed, interpreted. The city isn't just a place to live, it's a living calendar, a sacred machine. You feel it pressing on you, gently, insistently, reminding you that your daily chores are part of something bigger, whether you like it or not. And yes, sometimes that bigger thing involves people dying. Human sacrifice was part of ritual life in Cahokia, not rampant horror, but enough to make you thankful for your relative anonymity. Archaeological evidence shows ritual burials, decapitations, and ceremonial offerings buried beneath the mounds. The elite oversaw these rituals, reinforcing their authority and their connection to the divine. You're just a participant, a witness, maybe even a helper, wondering if you should have slept in today. Woodhenges, large circles of wooden posts, aligned to mark solstices, provide another layer to the spiritual landscape. You walk among them, noticing the careful spacing, the precision, the way sunlight hits a particular post at a precise moment in the year. You can almost hear someone muttering, "This is why we measure the sun, and this is why I didn't sign up to haul dirt for Monk's Mound." These aren't arbitrary constructions. They are deliberate, combining science, art, and devotion. And you, standing here in the morning chill, realize that someone had to observe, calculate, and plan centuries before a European astronomer even thought about the stars. The ceremonies themselves are a spectacle. People gather in the plazas, chanting, dancing, moving in patterns that echo generations of tradition. The elite direct the flow, ensuring that the city functions as both community and ritual stage. It's hypnotic, overwhelming, a little chaotic. You watch, half in awe, half in exhaustion, wondering if this is the moment when someone notices you wandering too close to the sacred fire. Sacred objects abound: copper plates, carved figurines, effigies of animals, shells strung into necklaces. Each item carries meaning, often tied to spiritual or political power. You handle one briefly and feel the weight of centuries. Not in a literal sense, it's just a small piece of copper, but in the sense that it represents connection, status, and the effort of countless people to create something lasting. It's impressive and slightly intimidating, like realizing that your spreadsheet at work will never have this level of consequence. You also notice subtle hierarchy in ritual spaces. Some areas are reserved for elites, priests, and leaders. Others are open to the masses. Even in spiritual practice, social stratification is impossible to ignore. You might be participating in the ceremony, but you also know your place in the city's complex social structure. It's humbling, in a very literal sense. And yet, despite the intensity, the rituals feel organic. They are embedded into the daily rhythm of Cahokia, marking planting and harvest, births and deaths, victories and failures. They provide structure, meaning, and continuity. You might complain about chores, the heat, or the smell of the smoke, but you can't deny the power of being part of a society that sees life, death, and the cosmos as interconnected. Religion in Cahokia is everywhere. It's dirt, fire, smoke, and drumbeats. It's the alignment of posts, the layout of mounds, and the choreography of crowds. It's awe-inspiring, exhausting, and occasionally terrifying. And as you leave the plaza, carrying a basket of maize back to your hut, you realize every action, every footstep, every laborious haul of soil from Monk's Mound is part of a sacred rhythm that has persisted across generations. Cahokia doesn't just live in the present. It lives in ritual, in memory, in the heartbeat of its people, and sometimes, if you're paying attention, it pulls you into its rhythm as well. You probably think of Cahokia as one sprawling, egalitarian city, where everyone just wakes up, hauls baskets of soil, eats corn, and calls it a day. Cute idea. In reality, life here is very much like any city ever. Some people have all the power, some people have very little, and most people are somewhere in the middle, quietly cursing the people above them, while still hoping the people below don't cause too much trouble. At the top are the elites, priests, political leaders, and a few lucky families who live atop Monk's Mound, or in large houses near the central plaza. These are the people with privilege, authority, and presumably slightly softer floors in their huts. They oversee trade, ritual, and construction projects. They sit in the shade while everyone else hauls soil, fish, or maize. They wear adornments, copper plates, shell jewelry, carved figurines, the ancient equivalent of flashy cars, or designer handbags. The social signal is clear. I am important. Bow respectfully, or at least pretend to. Below them are the skilled workers, artisans, traders, and specialists. You, if you're lucky, might belong here. Skilled labor brings some advantages. Access to better tools, a slightly more comfortable dwelling, maybe even a prized plot of land near a trade route. You carve effigies from stone, fashion, pottery, or weave baskets that everyone else relies on. Your work is respected, but your freedom is limited. You still answer to the elite, still wake up before dawn, still carry baskets heavier than you'd like to admit. The majority of people fall into the general labor category: farmers, field hands, fishermen, and construction crews. Your hut is modest, your meals are functional, and your days are long. You wake to the sounds of the city, the smell of smoke, the thrum of drums signaling someone else's agenda. You toil for the benefit of the city, and by extension, for the people who live atop Monk's Mound. Your labor is essential, your comfort optional. Don't worry. No one expects gratitude. You're part of the system, invisible unless you mess up. Children grow up learning their place, observing the hierarchy in both play and work. Some are trained to inherit positions, others to assist in labor, all to maintain the delicate balance of the city. There's little upward mobility, unless you display extraordinary skill, bravery, or luck qualities, sometimes rewarded with small privileges, a better seat at a ceremony, or the occasional minor indulgence. Think of it as the city's way of keeping the gears turning without anyone staging a revolt too often. And then there are outsiders, travelers, visitors from nearby settlements, perhaps traders who have wandered in from hundreds of miles away. They are tolerated, sometimes valued, but rarely integrated fully. The city is a living organism, but it has boundaries, and it keeps the essential functions in the hands of those who know the rules. Outsiders are like stray leaves caught in the wind, observed, sometimes harvested for goods or information, but ultimately secondary. Hierarchy isn't just about who gets to sit on Monk's Mound or wear the fanciest beads. It's built into daily life. Who carries water from the river, who hauls baskets of soil, who directs the placement of posts in a ritual space. It governs access to food, trade, shelter, and ritual participation. The elite may decide which ceremonies are performed, which fields are tended, and which neighborhoods get the best water. In other words, they don't just enjoy privilege, they enforce it in every corner of the city. And yet, the system works. Mostly. People know their place. Communities collaborate, rituals happen, crops grow, trade flows, and Monk's Mound rises higher. Everyone is connected, even if unequally, by necessity. The city's survival depends on obedience, cooperation, and the occasional clever dodge of responsibility when the elite aren't looking. So, as you move through Cahokia, you notice the subtle signals. Who wears what? Who eats first? Who gets the best spot at the plaza? Who is shouting orders? The social ladder isn't a rumor or theory. It's woven into every stone, every basket, every mound, and every ritual. You might not like it. You might curse it under your breath. But you respect it because, without it, the city would crumble. And, let's be honest, hauling baskets of soil from Monk's Mound is hard enough without worrying about chaos. Welcome to urban life in Cahokia. Hierarchy rules. Labor serves. And Monk's Mound, looming above it all, is the ultimate reminder of who really holds power in this city of 20 souls. You step away from the plaza and find yourself winding through the city's residential areas. The streets are dusty but well-trodden, lined with huts and homes that range from humble to slightly less humble. Each neighborhood has its own character, its own rhythm, its own collection of small dramas. You're instantly aware that Cahokia isn't just a city of monumental mounds and bustling markets. It's a city of people, with homes, families, and all the petty annoyances that come with living close to others. Your own hut is modest, a rectangular structure with a dirt floor and a thatched roof. The walls are made of wattle and daub, the material a mix of mud, clay, and woven sticks. It's surprisingly sturdy, considering how much effort went into keeping the roof from collapsing during heavy rains. You step inside and immediately notice how compact it is. There's space for cooking, sleeping, and storing belongings, but not much else. Privacy is minimal. The walls are thin, the neighbors' children can scream through them, and you can hear the clatter of pots and pans from 2 doors down. Welcome to urban life, 12th century edition. Neighborhoods are arranged with purpose. Homes cluster together in patterns that facilitate both community and supervision. You notice pathways connecting houses, open areas for children to play, and small communal spaces where neighbors gather to chat, trade food, or argue about whose dog ran off with someone else's chicken. It's charming in a slightly chaotic way, like a modern city, but with more dust and fewer streetlights. Families are close-knit. You recognize neighbors not just by face, but by their roles. Who tends the fire pit? Who watches the children? Who keeps the storage of maize organized? Life is intimate, sometimes annoyingly so. Privacy is a luxury few can afford, and everyone has an opinion about everything. Your neighbor's complaints about the smoke from your cooking fire are both irritating and inevitable. It's communal, living at its most intense a mix of cooperation, gossip, and quiet judgment. Housing isn't uniform. Some neighborhoods house skilled artisans with slightly larger huts and more decorative touches, carved wooden beams, painted walls, or extra storage for tools and goods. Other areas accommodate laborers. Their dwellings, smaller and more functional. Status is subtly reinforced through space, materials, and positioning within the neighborhood. Proximity to the plaza or major roads often indicates influence, while homes tucked away on the outskirts suggest lesser importance. The city communicates social hierarchy through architecture, whether you like it or not. Domestic life is centered on necessity and routine. Cooking happens over open fires or clay hearths. Smoke rises and lingers, mixing with the smell of roasting maize and drying fish. You wake to it each morning and fall asleep to it each night, a constant reminder that comfort is relative. Storage is simple. Baskets, clay pots, and small compartments in the hut's walls hold food, tools, and personal items. Luxury is measured in small increments: a finely made bead, a polished stone, a copper ornament. Children play in the streets, weaving between adults and animals, learning both the city's rhythms and its rules. Education is practical: how to cook, how to fish, how to help in the fields, how to respect hierarchy, how to avoid angering the neighbors. Skills are passed down orally and through observation, ensuring that every generation contributes to the city's continued functioning. You realize that growing up here is less about formal schooling and more about survival, adaptation, and social awareness. The neighborhoods, like the city as a whole, are alive. People move, work, argue, celebrate, and mourn within these tightly knit clusters of homes. Life is noisy, sometimes frustrating, often beautiful in its small moments. You might be exhausted, your back sore from hauling soil or carrying fish, but there's a rhythm here, a sense of belonging, and a strange comfort in the predictability of daily routines. Cahokia isn't just monuments and markets. It's a city of ordinary lives intertwined with extraordinary ambition. Every hut, every path, every neighborhood contributes to the pulse of the city, reminding you that the grand mounds and plazas only exist because people live, labor, and interact below them. You're part of it now, whether you like it or not. You wander through the side streets of Cahokia, past the smoke of cooking fires and the hum of children playing, and you notice something that doesn't immediately hit you. The city is alive with art. Not the kind you hang in galleries centuries later, but the kind you carry in your hands, wear on your body, or use in your daily chores. Pottery, copper, shell beads, carved figurines, all these small objects speak volumes about a society that valued creativity as much as survival. Pottery is everywhere. Some is purely functional. Thick, walled bowls, storage jars, cooking pots. You pick one up and feel the smooth curve of the clay, the slight imperfections that speak of hands shaping it by fire and water. Others are decorated with geometric patterns, effigies of animals, or intricate designs that might seem abstract to you but carry meaning for the people here. The patterns are repeated across the city, creating a visual language only insiders truly understand. It's both practical and symbolic. The pottery holds your food and tells your story at the same time. Copper is another marker of sophistication. Thin sheets hammered into plates, bracelets, and ceremonial objects glint in the sunlight, showcasing both skill and status. You notice the variation. Some are simple and utilitarian, others elaborately etched with animals, symbols, and designs. They are not mere ornaments, they signal hierarchy, spiritual connection, and craftsmanship. Imagine spending weeks hammering a copper plate for a ceremony, knowing it will impress the elites and maybe, just maybe, elevate your status. Or, alternatively, it will fall in the dirt, smudge, and make you the subject of quiet ridicule. Art is a gamble, as it always is. Shell beads and gorgets are both personal adornments and currency of social influence. People wear them around necks, wrists, and waists. They glitter under the sun, signaling wealth, prestige, or spiritual power. Some come from hundreds of miles away, traded through the city's extensive networks. Each bead carries a story: the journey of the shell, the hands that carved it, the traditions it embodies. You hold one briefly and feel the weight of that journey, an artifact of human connection stretching across the continent. Wood carving is practical, artistic, and sometimes ceremonial. Wooden posts, tools, figurines, and effigies are everywhere, marking ritual spaces, decorating homes, or aiding in daily chores. You notice a small carved bird, tucked under a hut's eave. It's delicate, precise, and beautiful, a tiny symbol of creativity hiding in plain sight. Someone spent hours, maybe days, carving it from a single piece of wood. You glance around to see who's watching and realize no one really notices, because in Cahokia, artistry is both abundant and quietly integrated into daily life. Textiles, baskets, and other woven goods also carry both utility and expression. Woven mats cover floors, baskets hold food and tools, and cords tie together bundles of goods for trade. Patterns are often repeated, and colors signify cultural and social cues. You find yourself pausing over a basket, tracing the weave with your fingers, appreciating the effort, and silently wondering how many hours someone invested to make something you might now treat as disposable. Art in Cahokia is not a separate realm. It is embedded in life. Ritual objects, everyday utensils, decorative items, and even urban design all carry aesthetic, social, and spiritual significance. The city itself is a canvas, with streets, plazas, mounds, and neighborhoods forming a living work of art. You begin to see the city not just as a collection of homes and labor, but as an orchestrated expression of culture, identity, and ambition. And, naturally, there's the subtle humor in it all. Someone spent weeks crafting a delicate copper plate, only for a dog to knock it into the dirt. Another person carves an intricate figurine, which then serves as a placeholder for offerings no one remembers. Beauty, labor, impermanence, all wrapped into daily life. You realize that Cahokia is as much a gallery as it is a city, and yet no one complains about the lack of signage or guided tours. As you wander further, you see the continuity of craftwork everywhere. pottery, copper, shells, carvings, textiles. The city's material culture is a constant conversation between function and expression, status and survival, community and individuality. Every object tells a story. Every handprint in clay speaks of someone who existed, labored, created, and imagined. Art in Cahokia is life itself, messy, brilliant, sometimes infuriating, but always deeply human. You leave the city's center, walking along a well-trodden path toward the outskirts, and you start noticing the signs of exchange. Not the digital notifications you're used to, not the express delivery trucks, just people, animals, goods, and ideas moving across distances that would make modern commuters wince. Cahokia is more than a city. It's the hub of a sprawling trade network stretching hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. And yes, it's impressive and slightly exhausting just to think about. Let's start with the obvious. Raw materials. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, stones from distant quarries, all converging in Cahokia. You pick up a shiny shell bead at the market. It didn't grow here. It didn't magically appear. It traveled hundreds of miles by foot, river, and canoe before ending up in your hand. Someone carried it. Someone bartered it. Someone polished it. And now it marks status, identity, or spiritual power. And you just walk past it thinking, meh, shiny thing. History, quiet but persistent, laughs at your apathy. Trade isn't just about shiny objects or status symbols. It's about survival. Maize, fish, beans, and other food items move along networks to prevent famine. Excess goods from one area, surplus corn, smoked fish, crafted tools travel to regions where they're needed. Cahokia doesn't exist in isolation. It relies on connection. It thrives because it can access distant resources and because distant communities rely on it in turn. Imagine a system where losing a single link in the chain could spell disaster. That's life here, precarious, interdependent, and slightly terrifying if you think about it too hard. Trade also spreads ideas. A design seen on pottery from one distant village appears on Cahokia ceramics decades later. Ritual objects, construction techniques, agricultural knowledge all move alongside goods. Knowledge is power, and Cahokia absorbs it in vast quantities, converting it into political influence, ritual prestige, and economic dominance. You, moving through the marketplace, might notice an unfamiliar pattern on a ceramic vessel and think, nice decoration, not realizing that it represents a connection spanning hundreds of miles. Art, commerce, and politics are inseparable. And yes, there's a hierarchy in trade too. The elite control the largest transactions. Copper plates, ceremonial goods, and exotic items pass through their hands first, ensuring they maintain both economic and symbolic authority. Skilled traders and artisans act as intermediaries, while ordinary laborers carry goods to the city, fish from rivers, or farm crops for exchange. Everyone participates, but not everyone benefits equally. Some get prestige, some get survival, and some get exhaustion. It's a microcosm of Cahokia itself, interdependent, hierarchical, and perpetually busy. Rivers are the highways. The Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers carry canoes laden with trade goods, connecting Cahokia to the Gulf of Mexico, the Great Lakes, and other major settlements. You imagine standing on the riverbank, watching a flotilla of dugout canoes arrive with copper, shells, or maize. The noise, the smell of wet wood, the sight of laborers balancing fragile cargo. It's like a modern port, but somehow more intimate and dangerous. One wrong move, and a valuable item ends up in the river, gone forever, and someone's about to be very annoyed. Cahokia's trade network isn't just economic, it's political. Controlling access to exotic goods ensures loyalty, dependence, and influence over neighboring communities. The city doesn't merely participate in a network, it dominates it. Its power grows because it is indispensable, because goods, knowledge, and prestige flow through it. You can't just walk into Cahokia and set up shop. You negotiate, adapt, and acknowledge that this city is the center of the known world for hundreds of miles around. And as you wander back toward Monk's Mound, carrying a basket of maize, you realize trade is more than exchange. It's connectivity, it's survival, it's power, and it's quiet, constant, and profoundly human. Every bead, every copper plate, every basket of corn is a thread in the intricate web that keeps Cahokia alive, a network of ambition, necessity, and brilliance stretching far beyond the city's mounds. So, next time you think of pre-Columbian North America as isolated villages in the wilderness, remember the trade networks. Cahokia wasn't just a city. It was a hub, a crossroads, a beating heart connecting a continent, and you, somehow, are right in the middle of it. You wake up to the sound of drums again. Only this time the city feels different. The air is electric, buzzing with anticipation, and the usual smells of cooking fires mingle with something more ceremonial: incense, smoke from ritual fires, and the faint tang of fermented corn beverages. Cahokia is preparing for a festival, and you, whether you like it or not, are part of the audience, the labor, and the spectacle all at once. Festivals in Cahokia aren't casual affairs. They are loud, crowded, exhausting, and profoundly organized. The plazas transform into stages for ceremony, trade, and performance. People from across the city, and sometimes from neighboring settlements, gather to witness rituals that reinforce hierarchy, celebrate cycles of life, or appease deities. You weave through the crowd, noting the decorations, colored cloths, shells, feathers, and carved effigies. Everything is symbolic, intentional, and slightly overwhelming if you're just trying to get to your hut before your next chore. Music is everywhere. Drums set the tempo, rattles punctuate the rhythm, and horns carved from wood or bone mark important moments. The beats echo across plazas and streets, synchronizing the crowd in a collective heartbeat. You feel it in your chest, even if you don't understand the exact spiritual or ritual meaning. Festivals are as much about physical presence as participation. Your body cannot help but be drawn into the rhythm. Ritual dances are a central feature. Participants wear masks, feathers, and ceremonial attire, performing steps learned over generations. Movements are precise, rehearsed, and symbolic. You try to follow along, or at least not trip over your own feet, while thinking, I'm pretty sure my neighbors back home would never let me get away with this kind of coordination. And yet, watching it, you feel a strange sense of belonging. Everyone is moving together, part of something bigger than individual lives, bigger than the city itself. Food and drink accompany the celebration. Corn cakes, smoked fish, and other communal meals are shared. Fermented beverages might loosen inhibitions, encourage social bonding, or just make the long day slightly more tolerable. People trade, exchange stories, and catch up on gossip. You notice the same hierarchy at play here as anywhere else in Cahokia. Elites and priests occupy the prime spots, receiving tribute and recognition, while laborers and commoners work, watch, and participate from the margins. Status isn't erased for festivals, it's reinforced in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Some festivals mark celestial events. Sun, moon, and star alignments dictate timing, reminding everyone that Cahokia's rhythm is intertwined with the cosmos. Others honor deities, ancestors, or agricultural cycles. Ritual offerings, sometimes including food, crafted goods, or even human participants, emphasize the seriousness of the occasion. You watch from the edge, slightly relieved you weren't chosen as a gift, and slightly impressed by the city's capacity for coordination. A festival of this scale requires logistics, planning, and collective patience, something modern cities would kill for. Games and competitions are also part of the fun, if you can call it that. Physical contests, races, and skill demonstrations give individuals a chance to display prowess, gain honor, or entertain the crowd. Children imitate adults, practicing their own moves in the dirt streets. Even laborers, exhausted from daily toil, might find themselves drawn into a quick contest, a brief, chaotic reminder that life isn't all work, all the time. And then there's the subtle theater, performances that blend storytelling, myth, politics, and ritual. Elders and priests narrate tales of creation, conquest, and divine order. You listen, half trying to keep up, half marveling at how intricate and theatrical these performances are. They remind everyone of the city's history, its cosmology, and the delicate balance between life, labor, and spiritual order. By the time the sun begins to set, the festival reaches its peak. Smoke rises from ceremonial fires, drums pound in steady rhythm, and the crowd, tired, exhilarated, and slightly hungover from fermented drinks, starts to disperse. You walk back through the streets, following familiar paths, reflecting on the sheer scale and energy of the celebration. Cahokia isn't just a city. It's a living, breathing organism with festivals as its pulse, rituals as its veins, and the people themselves as both participants and witnesses. And as you finally reach your hut, back aching from the day, you realize festivals aren't just entertainment. They are civic glue, spiritual instruction, social reinforcement, and a reminder that even in a world without modern conveniences, humans know how to throw a party that demands respect and leaves you exhausted, exhilarated, and just a little in awe. You might imagine Cahokia as a peaceful utopia. Sprawling plazas, bustling markets, monumental mounds, and the occasional drumbeat signaling a festival. Cute idea. In reality, any city this large, this organized, and this influential has to deal with conflict, internal tensions, rival settlements, and the occasional disgruntled laborer who's had enough of hauling soil up Monk's Mound. Welcome to the less glamorous side of urban life. Defensive structures are subtle but deliberate. Palisades, wooden walls reinforced with earth, encircle parts of the city. Watchtowers peak above the skyline, providing vantage points for spotting trouble long before it reaches the heart of Cahokia. You notice the stakes in the ground, the compacted soil of defensive ditches, and the well-trodden paths that connect walls to plazas. The message is clear. Cahokia is not defenseless, and it doesn't pretend to be. Conflict comes in many forms. External threats, rival settlements, raiders, or wandering groups are managed through visibility, intimidation, and sometimes strategic violence. A well-placed palisade or a sudden show of force can dissuade intruders, sending a message that Cahokia is both powerful and organized. You can almost hear the thought echo through history. Try us, and your fancy beads will sink in the river. Internal tensions are just as important. With 0 people living in close quarters, hierarchies enforced through labor, trade, and ritual, disagreements are inevitable. Arguments over land, resources, and status flare up, sometimes escalating to violence. The elite monitor disputes carefully, intervening when necessary, because disorder threatens the delicate balance of the city. A single riot or rebellion could unravel decades of planning and labor. You glance at Monk's Mound and think, all that soil and one angry mob could undo it? History is cruelly efficient. The city also maintains order through social norms and ritual. Public ceremonies, festivals, and communal workdays reinforce obedience, hierarchy, and collective identity. You may think of these as spiritual or civic occasions, but they double as control mechanisms. People feel part of the larger whole, connected to the rhythm of the city, and subtly reminded of their place in the hierarchy. Disobedience is both spiritually and socially costly. Weapons exist, but they're more about deterrence than constant combat. Wooden clubs, stone axes, and bows are common, but most conflict is managed through strategy, intimidation, and social enforcement, rather than full-scale battles. You watch a laborer hefting a large wooden tool and wonder if it doubles as a weapon in case someone argues over maize. Probably. Civilization is practical that way. Rival settlements also influence Cahokia's defensive planning. Trade networks, alliances, and occasional skirmishes shape urban development. Proximity to rivers, the positioning of neighborhoods, and the construction of mounds all serve both ceremonial and strategic purposes. Cahokia's leaders are aware that geography is as much a shield as the palisade, and they exploit it efficiently. You notice the elevation of Monk's Mound, realizing that its height provides both spiritual authority and an observational advantage. Clever. Even social enforcement can escalate to ritualized violence. Punishments, displays of authority, and public ceremonies sometimes include elements of coercion. The city's stability depends on both fear and respect, subtly intertwined. You feel the tension in the air as people move through plazas, aware that social missteps are observed, judged, and occasionally punished. Life in Cahokia is a careful dance of cooperation, negotiation, and subtle intimidation. The city thrives because people work together, follow rules, and respect hierarchy, or else. Labor, trade, ritual, and conflict are intertwined. One cannot exist without the others. You walk past the palisade, listening to distant drums, smelling smoke and roasting corn, and you understand that the city's survival depends on vigilance, strategy, and a constant awareness of both human ambition and human folly. Conflict in Cahokia is inevitable, managed, and sometimes spectacular. It shapes the city, reinforces hierarchy, and ensures survival. And as you rest your back after a day hauling soil or trading maize, you recognize that defense isn't just about walls or weapons. It's about planning, psychology, ritual, and social cohesion, the quiet, invisible threads that hold 20 people together. You wake up again to the smell of smoke, but this time it's accompanied by something more promising. Roasting maize, drying fish, and the faint tang of beans cooking over a fire. Hunger hits quickly in Cahokia, mostly because hauling baskets of soil, weaving baskets, or paddling canoes burns a surprising number of calories. Food isn't just nourishment here, it's survival, status, and occasionally a reason to brag. Maize is everywhere. Corn is the staple, the backbone, the lifeblood of Cahokia. You eat it roasted, boiled, or ground into flour for cakes and porridge. Some of it is sweet, some of it tough enough to break a tooth, but all of it is essential. Maize isn't just food, it's symbolic. It sustains life, marks status, and connects the city to the surrounding landscape. You carry your portion in a woven basket, grateful for every kernel, even if your fingers smell like smoke and dirt for the rest of the day. Beans and squash accompany maize, forming the classic Three Sisters trio when planted together. Beans climb the corn stalks, squash spreads across the soil, and together they provide a surprisingly balanced diet. You bite into a fresh bean, slightly bitter but nourishing, and think, this is civilization, one bite at a time. Combined, the Three Sisters are not only practical, but efficient, maximizing yield while maintaining soil fertility. Cahokia's farmers were subtly brilliant, even if their methods weren't covered in a modern textbook. Fish and other protein sources supplement the diet. Rivers and ponds provide catfish, bass, and other freshwater species. People smoke or dry the fish for preservation, trading it across the city and beyond. Occasionally, game such as deer, turkey, or small mammals appears on plates. Meat isn't as abundant as maize, but it's precious, communal, and often tied to ceremony. You savor a small smoked fish, knowing it took hours of preparation and effort to reach your hands. Cooking methods are pragmatic. Open fires, clay hearths, and earthen ovens dominate. Pots of beans, maize, or stew simmer for hours, smoke curling into the hut's thatched roof. You crouch over a fire, stirring a thick porridge, and marvel at the simplicity and efficiency, all without electricity, refrigeration, or modern cookware. The food is functional, satisfying, and occasionally a little gritty, depending on how careful you are grinding the maize. Fermented beverages are a regular feature, often made from maize, fruits, or other plant products. They're not for partying alone, though some might argue they improve social interactions, but also serve ritual, celebratory, and dietary functions. You take a small sip, feeling the warm burn as it slides down your throat, thinking, "Not bad, considering I didn't have to chase the corn myself." Food distribution is social as much as it is logistical. Families share meals, neighbors barter ingredients, and communal feasts mark ceremonies or festivals. Status affects portion size and quality. Elites enjoy more variety, better cuts of meat, and access to exotic goods, while common laborers make do with basic staples. The hierarchy doesn't vanish at the dinner table. It's subtly reinforced with every meal. Foraging supplements farming. Nuts, berries, and edible plants from surrounding forests add variety to diets. You might find a wild fruit or nut, crunching it absent-mindedly while hauling supplies. It's a small pleasure, a fleeting taste of autonomy in a city governed by labor, ritual, and hierarchy. Cahokia's diet isn't luxurious, but it's sustainable. Food is a daily negotiation with nature, labor, and social order. You wake hungry, work hard, and eat with purpose. Meals are functional, ritualized, and occasionally indulgent. They sustain the body, reinforce community, and remind you with each bite, each chew, each sip, that survival here is both a personal effort and a collective achievement. By the end of the day, as you wipe ash from your hands and settle near the fire, you realize that food is more than fuel. It is connection, culture, and the quiet proof that Cahokia thrives. Each meal is a testament to human ingenuity, cooperation, and stubborn resilience, and yes, sometimes it tastes better after a long, exhausting day hauling soil from Monk's Mound. You step into the streets of Cahokia and immediately notice the subtle language everyone speaks without words. Clothing and adornment. Here, what you wear is never just about covering your body. It's about status, identity, skill, and, occasionally, who gets to sit closest to the fire during a festival. You glance around, and suddenly, you're hyper-aware that your rough-spun tunic may mark you as a laborer, and that's perfectly fine until you have to navigate a crowd of the elite. Most everyday clothing is simple and functional. Tunics, skirts, and loincloths made from woven plant fibers or animal hides dominate. Breathable, flexible, and designed to withstand both work in the fields and long days hauling baskets. These garments are a practical choice for survival. You tug at your own garment, noting a slight scratch from carrying firewood yesterday. Minor imperfections are forgiven and expected. It's survival, not Fashion Week. But functionality isn't the only consideration. Clothing signals status. Higher-ranking individuals wear more elaborate attire. Dyed fabrics, feather decorations, copper ornaments, and shell jewelry. Some garments are dyed in earthy tones. Others show intricate patterns woven into the fabric itself. You notice a local elite wearing a tunic accented with copper plates and polished shells. It's not subtle. It's a statement. I'm above you, and you should know it. You adjust your posture accordingly and quietly hope no one notices the dirt on your sleeves. Adornment extends beyond clothing. Beads, necklaces, bracelets, and ear ornaments are common, crafted from shells, copper, stone, and occasionally bone. Each piece carries meaning, whether spiritual, social, or personal. Shells from the Gulf Coast might signal long-distance trade connections. Copper pieces denote wealth and authority. Carved figurines serve as personal or spiritual talismans. You handle a small shell bead, turning it over in your hand, and realize it has traveled farther than you ever will. A tiny, tangible thread connecting Cahokia to distant lands. Hair and body decoration are equally significant. Hairstyles can indicate age, status, or ceremonial participation. Scarification, painting, and tattoos. Yes, tattoos communicate social cues and spiritual affiliations. You catch a glimpse of someone with painted stripes on their arms, probably marking participation in a ritual or a festival. The markings are temporary, symbolic, and visually striking. You wonder if a modern city council would approve. But in Cahokia, it's tradition, identity, and spectacle rolled into one. Practicality and beauty intertwined. Clothing protects against sun, wind, and cold, while also conveying hierarchy, profession, or spiritual alignment. Feathered adornments flutter in the breeze, copper glints in the sunlight, and patterned fabrics signal expertise in weaving or dyeing. You walk past a weaver at work, the rhythm of her hands forming the pattern you'll never replicate, and you feel a mix of admiration and guilt. You can barely tie your own tunic correctly, yet here she creates social and spiritual currency with thread. Ritual and ceremonial attire is even more elaborate. Festivals, dances, and religious ceremonies often require specialized garments. Masks, robes, feathered capes, and ceremonial jewelry transform participants into symbols, not just individuals. You watch a dancer take the plaza stage, cloaked in feathers and copper plates, and realize the effect is intentional: awe, respect, and maybe a little intimidation. Clothing here is theater, communication, and status, all in one. Finally, clothing and adornment are not static. They change with seasons, rituals, and life stages. A garment worn during a festival might later serve as casual wear or be repurposed for trade. Jewelry and accessories circulate, gifted, inherited, or bartered, carrying stories along with them. You notice a shell necklace, previously traded across miles, now adorning a local child. It's small, beautiful, and a reminder that identity in Cahokia is woven as much from objects as from blood or birthplace. By the end of the day, as you adjust your tunic, tighten a cord, or glance at your modest jewelry, you realize clothing in Cahokia isn't superficial. It's functional, social, spiritual, and expressive. It signals your place, protects your body, and communicates messages that words alone could never convey. And yes, it also makes navigating the city a subtle game of observation and judgment, one you're learning to play, whether you like it or not. You hear them before you see them. Shrill laughter, shouting, and the occasional crash as a child collides with a basket of maize or an unsuspecting neighbor. Children in Cahokia are everywhere, not because they're unruly, but because they are essential. They are future farmers, artisans, traders, and, yes, occasional chaos agents. Life here starts early, and education is not optional. From the moment they can walk, children are observers. They watch adults, absorb social rules, and learn by imitation. You see a small child helping a parent with a clay pot, mimicking each movement with exaggerated care. Mistakes are frequent broken pots, spilled maize, unevenly woven baskets, but learning is hands-on. There's no formal school, no classroom, no grading system. Instead, daily life itself is the curriculum, rigorous, practical, and sometimes unforgiving. Play is a form of education too. Games aren't just for fun. They teach coordination, strategy, and social interaction. Children chase each other across streets, balance on narrow paths, and engage in mock competitions. You watch a group of kids wrestling in the dust and realize they're practicing skills that might one day help them in hunting, labor, or negotiation. Play teaches patience, persistence, and, occasionally, humility when someone inevitably falls face first into the mud. Practical skills are taught early. Boys and girls learn to carry baskets, fish, plant crops, weave mats, carve tools, and tend fires. Each task is not just labor, it's preparation for adulthood. You notice a child carefully tending a small plot of maize, already understanding crop rotation and soil management before puberty. Impressive. And slightly terrifying, because this is more responsibility than most modern teens face before their first job. Storytelling is a central part of education. Elders, priests, and skilled artisans narrate myths, history, and social rules. You hear tales of creation, heroic feats, moral lessons, and ancestral guidance. Stories aren't entertainment alone. They're embedded with lessons about social hierarchy, respect, ritual, and survival. You catch a child mimicking the cadence of an elder's tale, absorbing cadence, gestures, and content simultaneously. Words are more than words here. They are instructions, warnings, and cultural glue. Ritual participation is another lesson. Children observe ceremonies, learn chants, and sometimes assist in minor tasks. Through this, they internalize spiritual and civic norms. They see how festivals reinforce hierarchy, how labor is integrated with devotion, and how cooperation maintains social cohesion. You notice a small child wearing a miniature ceremonial necklace, standing in awe while elders chant. It's adorable, ceremonial, and also a subtle reminder. If you don't learn these lessons, life here is a lot harder. Social rules are absorbed through observation and consequence. Children quickly learn hierarchy, appropriate behavior, and how to negotiate minor disputes. Peer interactions teach fairness, strategy, and compromise, or at least survival tactics when dealing with an older sibling or neighbor's child. One wrong move in a crowded plaza can result in humiliation, and children internalize this quickly. You watch a child carefully hand a basket to an elder, bowing slightly, thinking, "Impressive. I still struggle with email etiquette." Apprenticeships formalize skill learning for older children. Once they reach a certain age, they may train under an artisan, trader, or skilled farmer. These apprenticeships are rigorous, often involving long hours, detailed observation, and repetition. Mastery takes years. Mistakes are punished with patience, or sarcasm, and the lessons are lifelong. You notice a young apprentice carefully hammering copper, sweat dripping, and you think, future elite? Maybe? Exhausted? Definitely. By adolescence, children are fully integrated into Cahokia's labor, trade, and ritual systems. Their education is complete, not in diplomas or certificates, but in experience, skill, and social understanding. They know the rhythms of the city, the importance of hierarchy, and the responsibilities of adulthood. And you, standing nearby, can't help but admire and slightly envy the efficiency of a system that turns chaos into competence with nothing but observation, repetition, and occasional gentle intimidation. Cahokia's children grow up fast, learning not just to survive, but to sustain the city. Education is constant, immersive, and pragmatic. It's hands-on, socially complex, and surprisingly effective. And as you watch another child chase a goat past a smoke-filled hut, you realize the city isn't just built by adults. It's built by the next generation, learning, playing, and preparing to take their place in the rhythm of Cahokia life. You notice it immediately. Cahokia changes with the seasons. Not just the obvious temperature swings, but the rhythm of daily life, the movement of people, and even the smells in the air. Each season brings its own challenges, routines, and, occasionally, comic mishaps like hauling wet maize through mud in early spring, or trying to cook over a wind-whipped fire in late autumn. Welcome to the city of 0 souls, where the calendar is a survival guide, not a suggestion. Spring is a time of preparation. Snow and frost recede, rivers swell with melted ice, and the land softens underfoot. Farmers rush to plant maize, beans, and squash. Fields must be plowed, seeds sown, and irrigation improvised. You step into the fields, mud sucking at your sandals, and realize this isn't leisurely gardening. It's backbreaking work, but vital. Spring is also the time of festivals, celebrating fertility, growth, and renewal symbolic, but also practical. Everyone knows that the success of crops depends on labor, ritual, and just a little bit of luck. Summer brings both abundance and stress. The sun beats down mercilessly on fields and plazas. Rivers offer relief, and insects stage a relentless offensive. You wake early to escape the heat, work long into the day hauling baskets, weaving mats, or tending fires. Food is plentiful, but so is labor. Summer festivals, ceremonies, and trade are in full swing. You watch a canoe, laden with copper and shells, arrive from hundreds of miles away, glistening in the sunlight. Trade, ritual, and labor intersect constantly. Life is both intense and mesmerizing. Autumn is harvest season, a delicate dance of timing and coordination. Crops must be gathered, dried, and stored before frost strikes. Communal effort peaks. Entire neighborhoods pitch in to ensure the city's survival through winter. You carry maize cobs across streets, crowded with laborers, artisans, and children, all moving in a rhythm dictated by both necessity and tradition. It's exhausting, chaotic, and absolutely essential. Without it, winter is not just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Winter, when it finally arrives, slows everything down. Cold winds howl across open plazas, fires crackle in homes, and labor shifts indoors. Fields lie dormant, rivers freeze at the edges, and people focus on maintaining food stores, repairing huts, and preparing tools for the next planting season. The rhythm of the city becomes quieter, reflective, and slightly grim. You huddle near the fire, sipping warmed maize porridge, grateful that the city's planning and labor in previous months will carry everyone through the harsh months ahead. Each season affects not only labor, but also social life. Festivals, rituals, and gatherings are timed according to celestial events and agricultural cycles. Spring celebrates planting, summer marks fertility and growth, autumn honors harvest, and winter encourages reflection, storytelling, and social bonding. You realize that Cahokia's calendar isn't arbitrary. It's a carefully calibrated system linking survival, labor, and spiritual life in a continuous, repeating cycle. Animals, too, dictate seasonal rhythms. Fish run in rivers at specific times, deer migrate through forests, and birds signal changes in weather. People adjust hunting, fishing, and gathering accordingly. You find yourself tracking not just the sun, but the migration of game and the movement of fish, aware that your livelihood depends on understanding patterns older than the city itself. Seasonal life also affects construction and maintenance. Mounds, homes, and public structures must be repaired or expanded during favorable weather. You haul baskets of clay and soil under the sun in summer, working alongside artisans and laborers, knowing that timing is critical. Monk's Mound doesn't rise by accident. It follows the rhythm of the seasons, the labor of the city, and centuries of planning. By the time you return to your hut in late winter, weary and cold, you realize that Cahokia is a city dictated by cycles not just social or political, but natural. Every action, every ritual, every laborious haul of soil or basket of maize is synchronized with the earth itself. Life here isn't just about surviving days. It's about surviving years, seasons, and generations. The city, like the people, breathes in time with the rhythm of nature. Seasonal life is demanding, exhausting, and occasionally brutal. But it's also beautiful, ordered, and sustaining. You recognize that survival, social cohesion, and even the grandeur of Monk's Mound depend on the city's intimate understanding of time, weather, and nature. Cahokia lives and thrives because it has learned to move in harmony with the world around it. You might think Cahokia is all work, soil, and ritual. Cute idea. Step away from the fields, mounds, and marketplaces, and you quickly realize that people here know how to enjoy themselves in their own, slightly exhausting, pre-modern way. Entertainment isn't about Netflix or TikTok. It's communal, participatory, and occasionally a little dangerous. Games are everywhere, especially for children and young adults. You watch kids running through narrow alleys, weaving between baskets of maize and the occasional startled goat. They wrestle, race, or compete in tossing games using stones or carved wooden objects. These aren't just amusements, they teach balance, coordination, strategy, and sometimes survival skills. You stumble upon a group of teenagers racing canoes along a river, splashing and laughing. It's chaotic, slightly reckless, and completely normal in a city that thrives on movement and skill. Adult games exist too, often intertwined with skill and social competition. Physical contests like wrestling, spear tossing, or foot races allow individuals to demonstrate prowess. Sometimes these games are ceremonial, performed in conjunction with festivals. Other times, they're informal, spontaneous challenges, a test of strength, agility, or strategy. You notice a young laborer challenging a more experienced artisan in a friendly wrestling match. The stakes? Pride, respect, and possibly a small wager. Everyone wins if the crowd enjoys the spectacle, and no one is too serious about minor bruises. Storytelling is central to leisure, blending entertainment with education. Elders recount myths, heroic deeds, and city history, while the audience lounges in communal spaces. You sit on a worn mat, listening as voices carry tales of creation, conquest, and divine intervention. The stories are vivid, dramatic, and occasionally funny, especially when the teller exaggerates the antics of ancestors to elicit laughter. Even laborers on break pause to listen, hanging on every word, absorbing social norms, and secretly judging minor details about the storyteller's delivery. Music and dance are inseparable from leisure. Drums, rattles, flutes, and horns create rhythm for dancers or accompany storytelling. You watch people move in patterns that appear spontaneous, but are likely rehearsed. The combination of sound, movement, and communal participation transforms ordinary streets and plazas into stages. Some dances are ritualistic, some celebratory, and some, well, let's just say they involve more energy than sense. The point, however, is enjoyment, unity, and shared experience. Social gatherings extend beyond formal events. People gather around fires to cook, share meals, trade gossip, or argue playfully about city politics. You overhear neighbors teasing each other over labor contributions or minor disputes. Laughter blends with smoke and the smell of cooking maize. Leisure is as much about relaxation as it is about maintaining social bonds. You notice how even minor games or conversations subtly reinforce hierarchy, teaching participants their place while allowing moments of enjoyment. Crafting can also be recreational. Skilled artisans sometimes create small personal objects for amusement or experimentation. A carved figurine, an unusual basket, or a playful pottery design. You spot a teenager working on a small clay animal, clearly enjoying the process. It's a reminder that creativity, while functional in Cahokia, also serves human enjoyment, self-expression, and mental relief from labor. Hunting and fishing double as both labor and leisure. A morning spent by the river, casting nets or tracking game, is tiring but also rewarding. There's satisfaction in skill, a thrill in competition with nature, and camaraderie with fellow hunters. You pause, considering that the line between work and play here is blurry. Sometimes delight and survival coexist in a single activity. Even rest itself is a form of leisure. After long days hauling baskets of soil, tending crops, or attending ceremonies, lying near the fire, watching smoke curl into the thatched roof, and listening to the city's hum is indulgence enough. Cahokia's residents understand balance. Work hard, celebrate skill, and allow time for reflection and enjoyment. By evening, as drums fade and laughter softens, you realize leisure is not frivolous here. It sustains morale, reinforces social bonds, sharpens skills, and even entertains the soul. In Cahokia, fun isn't a distraction. It's survival, cultural cohesion, and humanity wrapped in laughter, rhythm, and sometimes chaotic energy. You wake up to the soft hum of drums, smoke curling from ceremonial fires, and the faint scent of herbs burning in small clay braziers. Religion in Cahokia isn't a Sunday activity or a quiet ritual tucked away in private rooms. It's the pulse of the city, woven into every mound, plaza, and street. You quickly realize spirituality here is unavoidable, like dust, heat, or the occasional dog stealing your maize. The cosmos governs Cahokia. Sun, moon, and stars aren't just objects in the sky. They dictate planting, harvesting, ceremonies, and city planning. Monk's Mound and other earthworks are aligned with celestial events, reinforcing the belief that the city itself participates in a cosmic order. You walk across the plaza at sunrise, noticing how shadows stretch along carefully constructed paths. The alignment is intentional, meaningful, and slightly intimidating if you think about how deliberate it all is. Civilization, in this sense, is literal skywatching. Deities are numerous and abstract. Some embody natural forces: sun, rain, fertility, or the river itself. Others represent spiritual principles: balance, justice, and ancestral guidance. Priests and spiritual leaders act as intermediaries, interpreting signs, performing rituals, and reminding the city that divine displeasure is best avoided. You overhear a discussion about an upcoming ceremony to honor the corn deity, apparently. Someone forgot to offer thanks last season, and now a ritual is in order. Oversight has consequences. Divine indifference is not an option. Ritual objects are everywhere, and they're both sacred and practical. Copper plates, carved effigies, ceremonial masks, and shell ornaments serve as conduits for spiritual power. Some are purely decorative, some functional in ritual, and some a combination of both. You pick up a small carved bird, delicate, precise, and vibrating with implied meaning. Its purpose is more than aesthetic. It carries stories, symbolism, and authority. You feel, briefly, that even touching it without proper context might be a minor offense. Ceremonies are central to city life. Festivals, seasonal rituals, and rites of passage punctuate daily labor. People gather in plazas, dance, sing, and offer sacrifices, sometimes food, sometimes crafted items, and occasionally living participants in extreme cases. You notice the hierarchy is always present. Elites lead, priests officiate, laborers assist, and children watch. Participation reinforces social order while honoring divine forces. Religion is both spiritual guidance and civic glue, terrifyingly efficient if you think about it. Ancestors are revered. Life isn't just present-focused. It's a continuum. Burial mounds, ceremonial spaces, and offerings reflect a deep connection with those who came before. You walk past a small mound where shells and artifacts have been carefully placed. It's not just memorialization. It's an active dialogue with the past, a reminder that actions today resonate beyond a single lifetime. Ancestors enforce morality, social norms, and occasionally, guilt. Symbols dominate. Spirals, animal motifs, celestial imagery, all carry meaning. You notice the same spiral pattern etched on a pottery shard, a ceremonial staff, and a woven mat. Consistency is key. Symbolism reinforces understanding, communicates power, and, importantly, shows everyone that the city is cohesive, observant, and spiritually aware. Misreading or ignoring these symbols is unwise. You make a mental note to study them carefully. Spiritual leaders hold influence beyond ritual. They advise on crop timing, city planning, conflict resolution, and trade negotiations. Their authority is both divine and practical. They connect cosmology to daily life. You realize that following spiritual guidance isn't optional. It's pragmatic, and occasionally terrifying, because divine displeasure, social disapproval, or simple misfortune can overlap in inconvenient ways. By sunset, as fires flicker and the city settles into evening routines, you understand that religion is not a compartment of life. It is life itself in Cahokia. Labor, art, trade, and leisure are all intertwined with spiritual practice. The city, the cosmos, and its inhabitants form a single, continuous network of meaning. You feel both comforted and slightly unnerved, aware that every step, every offering, every decision participates in forces much larger than yourself. Religion in Cahokia is omnipresent, structured, and deeply integrated into survival, politics, and social cohesion. It guides daily life, reinforces hierarchy, and maintains the delicate balance between humans, nature, and the divine. And as you finally rest near a ceremonial fire, you realize that belief here is not passive. It is lived, enacted, and unavoidable. You might think death is quiet, private, or at least inconveniently unnoticed. In Cahokia, death is neither quiet nor irrelevant. The city lives and breathes with the awareness of mortality, and burial practices are both a social statement and a spiritual necessity. You step near a burial mound, sensing that even the dirt underfoot is deliberate, ordered, and, yes, a little intimidating. Burials are often elaborate. Bodies are interred with care, sometimes accompanied by pottery, jewelry, tools, or ceremonial objects. Each item tells a story: who the person was, what they valued, and where they fit in the social hierarchy. You crouch near a freshly placed offering, noticing tiny shell beads and a copper plate. The individual here isn't just dead. They're remembered, honored, and subtly reminding the living of their place in the world. Mortality is a social lesson disguised as ritual. Mound burials are particularly significant. Monk's Mound and other earthworks house the remains of elites or individuals of special importance. These burial mounds are massive, labor-intensive constructions, a final statement of status. You imagine the logistics: transporting soil, constructing layers, placing bodies with care, and ensuring the mound aligns with celestial markers. Death here is literally monumental, leaving a permanent imprint on the landscape. Funerary goods are both practical and symbolic. Tools accompany artisans, hunting implements follow warriors, and ceremonial objects mark spiritual roles. Jewelry, beads, and exotic items indicate wealth or connections. You pick up a small artifact, a carved animal, possibly a companion for the journey beyond. Objects aren't mere decoration. They serve as a bridge between life and whatever awaits. In Cahokia, being forgotten is unthinkable. The dead carry messages, expectations, and symbols of authority forward. Grave placement communicates hierarchy. Elites receive central, elevated locations with elaborate mounds, while commoners are interred in peripheral areas, sometimes in simpler pits or communal graves. Social structure survives death, and occasionally enforces anxiety among the living. You glance at a worker resting near a smaller mound, realizing that even in death, inequality persists. Mortality isn't democratic in Cahokia. Rituals accompanying death are extensive. Offerings are made, fires burned, and ceremonies performed to honor the deceased and ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. Community members participate in collective mourning, reinforcing social cohesion and reminding everyone of their shared mortality. You notice a child observing the ceremony, learning about respect, hierarchy, and spiritual responsibility simultaneously. Death is instruction, spectacle, and communal experience all at once. Beliefs about the afterlife are complex. Souls are thought to continue existing, influenced by actions in life, social status, and ritual observance. Offerings, ceremonial objects, and correct burial practices ensure safe passage and favor from ancestors or deities. You think about the precariousness, neglect a ritual, misplace an object, or disrespect hierarchy, and you risk offending not just the living, but the dead. Anxiety is built into tradition, and humans, predictably, excel at worrying. Cremation exists alongside inhumation in certain contexts. Fire purifies, transforms, and marks special cases. You watch embers glow as a ceremonial fire consumes carefully arranged objects. The smell is acrid, the heat intense, and the symbolism unmistakable. Transformation through fire conveys both reverence and power, life, death, and ritual in one flame. Burial practices also reinforce memory. Grave markers, mounds, and ceremonial offerings act as permanent reminders of ancestry, leadership, and spiritual continuity. The city itself becomes a landscape of memory, each mound a lesson in mortality, status, and societal values. Walking among these markers, you understand that Cahokia's dead continue to influence the living, shaping behavior, hierarchy, and belief long after their final breath. By evening, as fires fade and shadows stretch across burial mounds, you realize death in Cahokia is both feared and revered, private and public, mundane and monumental. Funerary practices communicate status, enforce social norms, and maintain spiritual balance. Life and death are deeply entwined, each action in the living city mirrored and guided by those who have already passed. Here, mortality is not an end. It's another layer of civilization, carefully measured, deeply symbolic, and profoundly human. You might imagine Cahokia as a city of farmers and priests. Cute idea. Step closer, and you see the backbone of the city. Artisans, laborers, and anyone whose hands are perpetually dirty with clay, soil, or sweat. Without them, Monk's Mound wouldn't exist. Ceremonial objects wouldn't glint in the sun, and the entire city would collapse into quiet chaos. They are the unsung heroes and occasional victims of civilization. Labor begins early and continues relentlessly. Fields must be plowed, baskets woven, clay shaped, fires tended. Children start with small tasks, carrying maize, gathering kindling, assisting older siblings. Adults specialize. Some haul soil to construct mounds, others craft pottery, carve tools, or fashion jewelry. Every task is a cog in a vast machine. No artisan, laborer, or apprentice operates in isolation. You watch a young worker lugging a basket of soil up a mound and think, congratulations. You're building history with your back. Artisans are specialized. Potters, weavers, carvers, and metalworkers each hold essential skills. Pottery isn't just functional. It's a statement, a vessel for ritual, trade, and memory. You notice a pot decorated with spirals identical to those on Monk's Mound, a small but deliberate link between labor, art, and symbolism. Skill is visible, appreciated, and occasionally envied. Mistakes, however, are also visible: a cracked pot, a misaligned pattern, and they carry consequences, subtle or otherwise. Labor isn't just functional, it's social. Work reinforces hierarchy, cooperation, and identity. Elites direct projects, skilled artisans instruct apprentices, and common laborers execute heavy tasks. You see someone passing tools, another shaping clay, a third supervising the mud piles, a choreography invisible to outsiders but essential to the city's survival. Coordination is impressive, exhausting, and slightly terrifying if you imagine it breaking down. Chaos, here, isn't theoretical, it's backbreaking. Seasonality dictates labor. Planting, harvesting, mound construction, and ceremonial preparation follow natural cycles. You lug baskets in summer, repair structures in winter, and wonder how your back will survive another season. Labor is relentless, repetitive, and integral. Every pile of soil, woven basket, or carved bead connects to survival, ritual, or trade. You begin to see work not just as necessity, but as language. Each task a statement of civilization. Craftsmanship communicates status. Elaborate pottery, carved copper, shell, jewelry. These objects are both functional and symbolic. Skilled labor elevates social capital. You notice a laborer polishing a shell bead with delicate precision. It's small, precise, and vital to a network of trade, spirituality, and hierarchy. Mastery of craft is power, visibility, and occasionally a ticket to slight envy among peers. Laborers and artisans are also teachers. Apprenticeship is hands-on, intensive, and often brutal by modern standards. Mistakes are corrected with patience, sarcasm, or mild intimidation. Children learn by observing, imitating, and failing spectacularly. You watch a teenager carve a small figurine, hands trembling, and think, this is what we call education in the pre-industrial era. Efficiency, skill, and hierarchy are taught simultaneously. Trade links labor to survival. Artisans produce goods not just for local consumption, but for exchange. Pottery travels, copper circulates, shells migrate across hundreds of miles. You handle a carefully carved tool, realizing that it represents hours of work, skill, and long-distance connections. Labor is local, but its effects are continental. Even leisure intersects with labor. Festivals, games, and ceremonial preparation require skill. Dance costumes must be woven, ritual objects crafted, and ceremonial foods prepared. Artisans create both utility and spectacle, blurring lines between work, creativity, and public life. You see that labor isn't just toil, it's culture, education, and social glue. By sunset, as artisans rest near fires, sweat and dust coating their skin, you realize that Cahokia thrives because of hands, thousands of them, skilled or unskilled, young or old. Labor here isn't invisible. It is monumental, ritualized, and essential. The city's grandeur, survival, and cultural identity rests squarely on those who move soil, shape clay, weave fibers, and craft symbols. Civilization, in Cahokia, is literally in the hands of the people. You step into the heart of Cahokia's marketplace and realize immediately, this city is alive with exchange, negotiation, and the occasional accidental collision with a basket of maize. Trade isn't just optional here, it's survival, social currency, and a subtle game of status, all wrapped into one messy, bustling network. You quickly understand that no one survives in isolation. Cahokia thrives on connectivity. Local trade is everywhere. Farmers barter maize, beans, and squash for tools, pottery, or woven mats. Artisans exchange crafted items for raw materials or luxury goods. Children help transport baskets or run errands, learning early that commerce is as essential as labor. You notice someone haggling over the price of a clay pot, eyebrows raised, voice low. Negotiation here is as much about persuasion and observation as it is about the goods themselves. Miss the subtle cues, and you're left with a cracked pot or a bruised ego. Long-distance trade is equally impressive. Shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from distant sources, mica, and rare stones travel hundreds of miles to reach Cahokia. You handle a carefully polished shell bead, feeling the weight of geography, labor, and time. That bead represents not just craftsmanship, but a vast network of connections, rivers, canoes, alliances, and yes, probably a few arguments over who gets what first. Trade is logistical genius wrapped in human stubbornness. Markets are social theaters. Prices aren't the only concern. Reputation, skill, and social awareness are just as important. You watch an artisan demonstrate pottery technique to attract buyers. A skilled hand draws a crowd, increases value, and subtly reinforces the artisan's status. Observation and timing are as important as the goods themselves. Miss a cue, and you're out of favor or stuck with an unwanted item. Civilization, in Cahokia, comes with negotiation. Luxury goods are status symbols. Copper plates, carved effigies, and exotic shells are displayed prominently, often at festivals or in elite households. You notice a young trader presenting a string of rare beads to a local leader. The transaction isn't just economic, it's symbolic. Trade demonstrates connections, skill, and influence. Without it, social standing falters, and in a city obsessed with hierarchy, faltering is dangerous. Resource management is critical. Corn, beans, and squash must be produced in surplus for both trade and sustenance. Fish, game, and gathered goods supplement local production. The city's leaders oversee storage, distribution, and allocation, ensuring stability across seasons. You realize that trade isn't just optional social behavior, it's a careful balance of supply, demand, and risk. Mismanagement can mean famine, unrest, or both. Specialization fuels efficiency. Farmers focus on crops, artisans on craft, and traders on moving goods. Each role is interdependent. You watch a basket maker deliver wares to a trader, who then moves them across town or downstream to neighboring settlements. The chain is intricate, fragile, and somehow it works. Civilization here is organized chaos, underpinned by labor, observation, and subtle coercion. Trade also reinforces alliances and diplomacy. Neighboring settlements exchange goods to maintain peace or cement relationships. You overhear whispers about shell trades that smoothed over disputes hundreds of miles apart. Economic exchange becomes political strategy, teaching a subtle lesson. Survival is rarely local. and influence stretches across rivers, forests, and shared history. Even ceremonial life relies on commerce. Festivals, rituals, and elite events demand goods: food, crafted items, ceremonial clothing, and rare objects. Traders and artisans supply these items, linking everyday labor to the spiritual and social life of the city. You watch a festival procession where every bead, feather, and copper plate has traveled from fields, workshops, or distant rivers, proof that Cahokia is a city that literally moves through trade. By evening, as you rest near the marketplace, exhausted from observation and the faint smell of roasting maize, you realize Cahokia's economy is more than barter. It's a web of labor, skill, negotiation, and trust. Trade sustains the city, reinforces social hierarchies, and connects Cahokia to a broader world. Without it, Monk's Mound would be a pile of dirt, shells would remain distant curiosities, and the city's pulse would falter. Civilization, in Cahokia, is measured not just by monuments, but by the movement of goods, ideas, and people through the veins of commerce. You step into Cahokia and quickly notice that power isn't hidden behind walls or bureaucratic paperwork. No, it's visible, woven into the city itself, its mounds, plazas, and labor patterns. Leadership here is ceremonial, political, and occasionally intimidating. You realize immediately, survival depends on understanding not just the geography, but the hierarchy. At the top, elites hold authority through a mix of ritual, wealth, and social expectation. Monk's Mound itself is a symbol, a monument to status, visibility, and control. From its summit, leaders could oversee the city, plan labor, and reinforce their prominence. You glance at someone ascending the mound with ceremonial objects, noting the subtle mixture of fear, respect, and awe in the crowd below. Leadership is not subtle. It is designed to be observed. Political authority isn't distributed evenly. Certain families or lineages dominate, controlling labor, trade, ritual, and decision-making. You notice how these elite families inhabit the largest, most central structures, surrounded by servants, artisans, and advisors. Influence is embedded in architecture, social access, and ceremonial visibility. You realize hierarchy is spatial as well as social. Location literally defines power. Ritual legitimizes authority. Leaders participate in ceremonies, conduct offerings, and oversee festivals. Their role isn't purely administrative, it's spiritual, symbolic, and performative. You watch a chief present maize offerings atop Monk's Mound, flanked by priests and attendants. The act reinforces hierarchy, reassures the populace, and reminds everyone that leadership is intertwined with both cosmology and daily survival. Missing a ritual is not an option. Oversight could be interpreted as incompetence or even divine disfavor. Advisors, priests, and skilled laborers form a secondary layer of governance. They guide decisions, execute plans, and maintain order. You see a priest coordinating construction efforts, a laborer directing baskets of soil, and an artisan demonstrating ceremonial pottery. Authority is networked. Not every decision comes from a single point. The city functions through layered supervision, combining influence, expertise, and social pressure. Democracy is optional, but efficiency is mandatory. Conflict resolution is both subtle and public. Disputes over labor, trade, or status are mediated by leaders or intermediaries. Punishments, ritualized reprimands, and social cues enforce compliance. You witness a minor disagreement in the plaza. A laborer disputes a quota. An elder intervenes, and tension dissipates before anyone throws a basket of maize. Governance is as much about observation and subtle coercion as it is about spoken law. Resource allocation reinforces leadership. Elites control access to surplus food, crafted goods, and ceremonial objects. By controlling essentials, leaders maintain loyalty, enforce hierarchy, and ensure the city operates efficiently. You notice a trader distributing maize during a festival, careful to respect social ranking. Survival, politics, and ceremony intertwine seamlessly or ruthlessly, depending on perspective. Decision-making blends pragmatism with ritual. Leaders consult advisors, observe omens, and consider resource needs. Political choices are rarely abstract. They directly affect survival, labor distribution, and ceremonial scheduling. You see a chief pause before approving mound construction plans, aware that every miscalculation ripples through the city. Leadership is responsibility, visibility, and an unspoken promise. Fail publicly, and the consequences are social, spiritual, and possibly physical. Military or defensive authority is embedded in leadership as well. Leaders organize labor for fortifications, coordinate defense strategies, and signal the city's strength to rivals. Palisades, watchtowers, and patrols are visible proof that power isn't just symbolic. You glance at a young guard practicing with a wooden club, realizing that authority extends from ceremonial spaces to practical enforcement. By evening, as you watch the city settle into labor, leisure, and ritual, you understand that Cahokia's political system is intricate, visible, and tightly interwoven with everyday life. Leadership is ceremonial, social, economic, and occasionally intimidating. It is both a product of human organization and a tool for survival. The city thrives because power is enacted, observed, and maintained through ritual, labor, and social expectation. And everyone, from the youngest child to the eldest artisan, knows exactly where they stand. You step into a Cahokian plaza and immediately sense it. Life happening in layers. Not just people moving from point A to point B, but energy, observation, negotiation, and the occasional minor disaster involving spilled maize or an overly enthusiastic goat. Public spaces are the city's beating heart places for work, play, ritual, and, occasionally, subtle social politics. Plazas are central, open areas where multiple facets of life converge. You see laborers carrying baskets of soil, artisans displaying wares, children weaving in and out of adults, and elite figures observing from slightly elevated platforms. It's crowded, chaotic, and incredibly functional. Every footstep, every conversation, and every gesture is part of a rhythm the city has refined over decades. You almost trip over a basket of corn, realizing that navigating the plaza is a skill in itself. Markets occupy significant portions of these spaces. Farmers, artisans, and traders converge to exchange goods maize for tools, shells for pottery, fish for baskets. Commerce is public and performative. Negotiation happens in front of neighbors, friends, and rivals. You notice a vendor demonstrating pottery techniques, attracting an audience and subtly asserting skill. Marketplaces are classrooms, performance stages, and arenas of influence, all at once. Miss a social cue here, and your bargaining position might crumble faster than an unbaked clay pot. Public spaces are also ceremonial stages. Festivals, dances, and ritual gatherings fill plazas with music, smoke, and color. You watch drummers guide dancers in precise patterns, feathers glinting in sunlight, copper ornaments clinking rhythmically. These gatherings aren't mere entertainment. They reinforce hierarchy, transmit culture, and demonstrate the city's capacity for coordination. You begin to understand that the grandeur of Monk's Mound extends into everyday social life. Hierarchy is omnipresent, subtle, and occasionally unavoidable. Social observation is constant. Public spaces are arenas for gossip, influence, and social signaling. Children mimic adults, learning not just skills but behavior, etiquette, and social hierarchy. You notice a teenager carefully observing an artisan's posture, trying to emulate the confidence that elevates him socially. Everyone is watching, learning, and occasionally judging. Privacy is minimal. Reputation is everything. You realize that a misplaced word or gesture can ripple through social networks far faster than a mismanaged basket of corn. Recreation overlaps with social life. Games, mock competitions, and informal contests occur naturally. You see children wrestling, teenagers racing canoes, and adults engaging in physical contests or casual storytelling. Laughter, applause, and the occasional minor injury punctuate daily life. Public spaces are places where skill, bravery, and wit are displayed and rewarded. Participation strengthens bonds, teaches rules, and occasionally humbles the overly confident. Gathering spaces are also strategic. Leaders and elites observe from elevated platforms, allowing them to monitor labor, distribution, and social dynamics. You notice subtle gestures, a nod here, a glance there, regulating activity without spoken commands. Public observation is a form of governance, reinforcing authority while maintaining the illusion of organic interaction. Social cohesion relies on this quiet surveillance as much as ritual or labor quotas. Community problem-solving also occurs in public areas. Disputes over labor, trade, or resources are mediated in the open, with elders or elites acting as arbiters. Resolution is performative. Authority is visible. Norms are reinforced, and social order is maintained. You witness a disagreement over maize distribution, settled publicly with minimal fuss but maximum social signaling. Conflict here is educational, theatrical, and subtly coercive. Finally, public spaces reflect city identity. They are meticulously maintained, intentionally designed, and multifunctional. Streets, plazas, and open areas accommodate labor, ritual, play, and observation. You realize that walking through these spaces isn't just travel. It's participation in the city's social, spiritual, and political ecosystem. Every corner, mound, and open area is loaded with meaning, waiting to be read by attentive eyes. By dusk, as smoke curls from fires and the city slows its rhythm, you understand that Cahokia's public spaces are more than squares of dirt. They are stages, classrooms, marketplaces, and governance tools. Life here unfolds publicly, continuously, and deliberately, ensuring that survival, social cohesion, and civic identity are intertwined with daily movement, observation, and interaction. Civilization is alive, visible, and occasionally chaotic, and Cahokia thrives because everyone is both actor and audience. You step into a plaza filled with drums, smoke, and a faint lingering scent of roasted maize. Cahokia's festivals are inescapable. They dominate space, time, and social hierarchy, leaving no resident untouched. These aren't casual celebrations. They are orchestrated events that combine religion, politics, and public spectacle, designed to keep the city functioning, obedient, and occasionally awe-inspired. Seasonality dictates the festival calendar. Planting, harvest, solstice, and lunar events guide the timing of celebrations. Spring festivals honor fertility and renewal. Summer ceremonies celebrate growth. Autumn rituals bless harvests. Winter observances encourage reflection and spiritual alignment. You notice how every drumbeat, feathered costume, and carefully arranged offering aligns with both the agricultural cycle and cosmological events. Festivals here are civic planning disguised as religious enthusiasm. Ritual objects play central roles. Copper plates, carved effigies, shells, and feathers are arranged meticulously. You watch an artisan place a copper plate on an altar, knowing that each object carries centuries of cultural significance. Misplacement isn't just embarrassing. It could be interpreted as disrespect or even invite divine displeasure. In Cahokia, the stakes of festival organization are surprisingly high. Music, dance, and performance dominate public life during festivals. Drums dictate rhythm, rattles punctuate action, and dancers in elaborate costumes move in precise patterns. You observe a line of performers atop a raised platform, feathers glinting, copper clinking. The spectacle isn't merely entertainment. It reinforces hierarchy, displays spiritual authority, and signals social cohesion. Everyone is both participant and observer, learning subtle social cues while experiencing spiritual ritual. Food and feasting are integral. Surplus crops, smoked fish, and ceremonial dishes are prepared for communal consumption. You watch families and laborers gather near fires, sharing food with a mix of reverence and practical hunger. Feasting is social, religious, and political, providing nourishment, while subtly reinforcing loyalty to leaders and spiritual traditions. Maize, beans, and squash are not just eaten, they are celebrated. You bite into a roasted ear and realize that every chew is both pleasure and social obligation. Sacrifice, both symbolic and occasionally literal, punctuates festivals. Animals, carefully selected and ritually prepared, are offered to deities. Some ceremonies include symbolic human offerings, reflecting cosmological beliefs and social hierarchies. You glimpse a small effigy placed atop an altar, and the seriousness of ritual is undeniable. Festivals enforce a moral universe. Life, labor, and hierarchy are inseparable from spiritual favor. Children and apprentices play active roles. They assist in organizing rituals, carrying offerings, and observing dances. Participation educates them about hierarchy, labor, and spiritual responsibility. You notice a young child imitating the gestures of priests, learning early that ceremonies are about more than spectacle. They are lessons in survival, obedience, and cultural literacy. Leadership is on full display. Chiefs, priests, and elite families occupy central positions, guiding rituals, observing proceedings, and signaling authority. You notice subtle cues, nods, glances, positioning that direct the crowd without a single spoken word. Authority is both visible and performative. The city watches, learns, and acknowledges hierarchy in real time. Trade and craft intersect with festivals. Artisans display ceremonial pottery, jewelry, and textiles. Traders provide exotic goods from afar. You see shells and copper objects changing hands, often in front of a large audience. Festivals amplify the economy, reinforcing social hierarchies and interconnecting labor, trade, and spirituality. Civilization is not just observed, it is actively performed. By the time the fires dim and music fades, you realize that Cahokia's festivals are not optional indulgences. They structure time, reinforce social norms, transmit cultural knowledge, and maintain spiritual balance. Every drumbeat, every offering, every dance step is a thread in the intricate web of urban life. Participation is unavoidable, observation is necessary, and forgetting your place is dangerous. Festivals are education, entertainment, ritual, and governance all rolled into one. In Cahokia, celebration is survival. You stroll through Cahokia and might assume the city exists in peaceful harmony. Cute idea. Step closer, and you realize that behind the bustling plazas, mounds, and ceremonial spaces lies a city always aware of danger. Warfare, defense, and strategic planning are as integral to daily life as planting maize or polishing copper. You begin to understand that survival here isn't just about labor and ritual, it's about vigilance. Palisades are the first clue. Wooden walls encircle parts of the city, offering protection against rivals, raiders, or the occasional overzealous neighbor. You notice the effort involved: massive posts, deep trenches, and gates carefully positioned for control. It's defensive architecture that doubles as social messaging. We are organized, powerful, and not to be trifled with. Missing a post, misaligning a gate, or failing to maintain defenses is socially visible and strategically dangerous. Military organization is surprisingly sophisticated. Warriors are not just muscle. They are trained, coordinated, and integrated into city life. You see young men practicing with wooden clubs, shields, and spears under the watchful eyes of elders. Training is continuous, combining physical skill, discipline, and knowledge of terrain. Battle is not left to chance. Preparation is key. You think modern city planners should probably consider this level of foresight. Conflict management is both preventive and reactive. Leaders negotiate with neighboring settlements, mediate disputes, and occasionally mobilize forces to demonstrate strength. You overhear whispers of a past skirmish over resources, resolved with a combination of diplomacy, ritual, and the implied threat of force. Warfare in Cahokia isn't purely destructive. It's also a social and political tool, maintaining order both internally and externally. Fortifications extend beyond palisades. Elevated mounds serve dual purposes: ceremonial symbolism and strategic observation. From these heights, leaders could oversee labor, monitor rival settlements, and signal warnings if danger approached. You notice guards stationed atop smaller mounds, scanning the horizon with quiet vigilance. Defense and urban design are intertwined. Every mound and pathway is both symbolic and practical. Weapons are functional and symbolic. Wooden clubs, stone-tipped spears, bows, and shields are crafted with precision, balancing efficiency and visibility. You see a set of ceremonial weapons displayed during a festival, objects meant to impress, intimidate, and reinforce hierarchy. In Cahokia, military preparedness is part spectacle, part necessity. Status, skill, and defense coexist in polished wood, sharp stone, and strategic positioning. Training involves more than combat. Scouts, messengers, and laborers supporting fortifications are essential. You notice children learning to run routes through the city, carrying messages, or practicing agility. Skills that seem mundane, weaving baskets, carrying water, stacking soil, have direct applications in warfare logistics. Civilization is interconnected. Every action, no matter how trivial it seems, contributes to survival. Strategic alliances complement military readiness. Trade networks, marriages, and ceremonial exchanges strengthen ties with neighboring communities. You observe a messenger departing with shells and copper, carrying both goods and subtle political messages. Warfare isn't just fought with weapons. It's fought with diplomacy, trade, and shared ritual obligations. Missing a gesture, misinterpreting a gift, or underestimating a neighbor can be disastrous. Internal order is equally important. Enforcement of labor quotas, hierarchy, and ritual participation ensures that the city functions efficiently, even under threat. Warriors, elites, and laborers all know their roles. You watch a minor dispute over labor resolved quietly but decisively, a reminder that internal stability is the first line of defense. Chaos within is far more dangerous than any external attack. By nightfall, as fires burn along palisades and mounds cast long shadows, you understand that Cahokia's strength lies in preparation, observation, and coordination. Warfare and defense are woven into daily life, urban design, and social hierarchy. Every mound, palisade, and patrol is a statement. Civilization is organized, resilient, and unyielding. Survival is not left to chance. In Cahokia, vigilance is everyday life, and failure is visible, immediate, and rarely forgiven. You walk through Cahokia today and see the remnants of mounds, plazas, and ceremonial spaces. Quiet, empty, and oddly serene. But imagine it once teeming with life. 20,000 people, laboring, trading, dancing, worshiping. Now it's mostly silence. How did such a thriving, sophisticated city fade from prominence? That question lingers, wrapped in mystery, speculation, and a little dread. Decline didn't happen overnight. Evidence suggests environmental, social, and economic pressures accumulated over decades. You notice signs of soil depletion, shifting river courses, and unpredictable flooding. Fields that once yielded abundant maize struggled to support the city's population. Laborers and farmers must have noticed, nervously adjusting planting strategies and praying for rain, while elites debated ceremonial solutions. Civilization doesn't always crumble suddenly. Sometimes it fades, step by step, as nature and society conspire. Social strain likely amplified environmental pressures. You imagine the constant management of hierarchy, labor, and trade under increasing scarcity. Disputes over resources, tensions between elites and laborers, and potential conflicts with neighboring settlements could have compounded stress. You see a young laborer, exhausted from hauling soil, silently wondering if tomorrow will bring the same demands. Rebellion, migration, or subtle resistance, small acts often leave no trace, but they ripple through society. Trade networks may have faltered. Cahokia relied on shells, copper, and exotic goods from hundreds of miles away. Disruptions in supply could strain political alliances, ceremonial preparation, and elite authority. You watch a shell bead, lying forgotten in the dirt, imagining it once traveled hundreds of miles. The absence of such objects would be felt far more deeply than you might expect. Civilization, it seems, is as dependent on distant rivers and forests as it is on local labor. Climate may have played a role. Evidence points to periods of drought and shifting river patterns. Maize yields dropped, rivers flooded unpredictably, and social cohesion was stressed. You picture priests and leaders interpreting celestial signs, desperately trying to convince the populace that divine favor still existed. Even belief has limits when survival is at stake. Migration appears in the archaeological record. Families moved, settlements contracted, and population density decreased. You wander among smaller mounds and empty plazas, imagining abandoned homes, silent workshops, and children learning life lessons elsewhere. Abandonment may have been gradual. First the outskirts, then neighborhoods, and finally the heart of Cahokia itself. Civilization doesn't always fall with a bang. Sometimes it trickles away quietly. Ritual life may have changed or faltered. Festivals, ceremonies, and public gatherings could no longer be maintained at previous scale. Priests and elites may have lost influence, undermining social cohesion. You imagine empty plazas, where drums once echoed, and dances where feathers no longer glimmered. Social glue, once reinforced by ritual, slowly eroded. Yet mystery dominates. Why leave such monumental structures behind? Why abandon mounds, meticulously built over decades? You walk past Monk's Mound, imagining someone pausing mid-construction or choosing to stop work. The answer isn't clear. Perhaps the city became unsustainable, perhaps social cohesion fractured, or perhaps external pressures, rivals, disease, or climate shifts demanded migration. You realize that humans are capable of both astonishing creation and quiet disappearance. Even in decline, Cahokia leaves lessons. Urban planning, labor organization, social hierarchy, ritual life, and trade networks persisted long enough to influence surrounding regions. You notice subtle signs of continuity, artifacts, cultural echoes, and mound-building techniques that spread beyond the city. Civilization, in this sense, is never truly gone. It morphs, migrates, and leaves traces. By nightfall, as you wander among silent mounds, you feel a mixture of awe and melancholy. Cahokia was once vibrant, teeming with life, and sophisticated beyond what many imagined for pre-Columbian North America. Now, it is a reminder of human ingenuity, resilience, and fragility. Silence itself tells a story, monumental, mysterious, and haunting. Decline is complex. It's environmental, social, economic, and political. It's gradual, messy, and often invisible, until the consequences are undeniable. And yet, the city's legacy remains in mounds, artifacts, and questions that linger longer than answers. Civilization thrives, struggles, and sometimes fades, but memory, interpretation, and imagination keep it alive. You walk through the remnants of Cahokia and realize something remarkable. The city, long abandoned, still speaks, not in words, but in mounds, plazas, artifacts, and the faint echo of human ambition. Its legacy is subtle, often overlooked, yet astonishing. Civilization does not vanish entirely. It leaves traces, whispers, and lessons for anyone willing to pay attention. The first legacy is urban planning. Cahokia's mounds, plazas, and roads weren't haphazard. They reflected deliberate design, social hierarchy, and cosmological alignment. Modern urbanists might raise an eyebrow at the precision and scale. You see Monk's Mound dominating the skyline, not just a pile of dirt, but a statement of vision, labor, and societal coordination. Contemporary city planning can learn a lot from a city built without concrete, cranes, or zoning boards. Coordination and human organization transcend technology. Cahokia's labor and artisan systems leave another mark. Specialized craftsmen, apprentices, and coordinated labor ensured the city's survival and cultural richness. The integration of work, ritual, and trade is instructive. Civilization thrives when tasks are interconnected, hierarchies are respected, and skill is nurtured. You glance at a broken pot, imagining the hands that shaped it. Labor was both practical and symbolic, reinforcing social cohesion, a lesson still relevant for modern workplaces obsessed with efficiency. Trade networks and long-distance exchange continue to fascinate. Shells from the Gulf, copper from distant rivers, and exotic stones moved hundreds of miles, connecting people, ideas, and wealth. Modern economists could admire the complexity. Supply chains, logistics, and social signaling all in pre-Columbian North America. You pick up a polished shell bead and feel the weight of history, imagining rivers, canoes, and negotiations spanning landscapes. Cahokia reminds us that globalization isn't new, it's just older than we often assume. Spiritual and ceremonial life informs cultural continuity. Mounds, rituals, and festivals reflect integration of belief, labor, and public spectacle. Modern society often compartmentalizes religion, work, and leisure, yet Cahokia blended them seamlessly. You observe the remnants of plazas where drums once echoed, imagining collective energy guiding labor, trade, and education. The city's integration of spiritual life and social structure remains a profound example of human ingenuity and cohesion. Cahokia's decline is a cautionary tale. Environmental stress, social strain, and disrupted trade likely contributed to abandonment. You notice eroded mounds and silted plazas and think about modern parallels: climate change, resource depletion, and social fragmentation. Civilization is fragile, even when monumental. The city teaches us that success requires continuous adaptation, observation, and balance. Ignoring warning signs can lead to quiet disappearance rather than dramatic collapse, often more dangerous because it lulls observers into complacency. Archaeological research continues to uncover insights. Each excavation, artifact, and analysis reshapes our understanding of pre-Columbian North America. You imagine researchers brushing away soil to reveal a small bead or pottery shard, mundane, yet profoundly illuminating. Cahokia challenges assumptions. North America wasn't an empty wilderness before Europeans arrived. Advanced urban centers, complex social hierarchies, and long-distance networks existed, demanding respect and re-evaluation of historical narratives. Cahokia's influence endures in culture and memory. Mound-building techniques, ceremonial practices, and urban organization inspired neighboring cultures. You see echoes of Cahokian methods in later Mississippian settlements, a silent testament to cultural transmission. The city's legacy is not just material, it's intellectual, social, and symbolic, bridging centuries and informing modern understanding of urban development and cultural complexity. Finally, Cahokia teaches humility. Standing among massive mounds, you realize the scale of human endeavor without modern tools, technology, or written language. The city thrived, declined, and still communicates with those willing to observe carefully. It asks us to reconsider what civilization means and to acknowledge achievements that might otherwise be ignored. The lessons are subtle. Cooperation, planning, ritual, and observation matter more than monuments alone. By dusk, as shadows stretch across Monk's Mound and the city quiets into history, you feel both awe and reflection. Cahokia's legacy isn't only archaeological, it's ethical, intellectual, and cultural. Civilization is fragile yet enduring, ephemeral yet profoundly instructive. Its story is a reminder that humans are capable of extraordinary achievement and equally capable of vanishing, leaving only questions, mounds, and echoes of life long past. Cahokia remains a city of lessons, a monument to ingenuity, and a whisper from the past. You realize that understanding it requires patience, attention, and imagination. Civilization is a story one that begins with labor, flourishes with community, and resonates long after silence.